She stood trembling in her borrowed gown as the crown prince's words cut through the crystal chandeliers and silk-draped ballroom. You, my mate? I'd rather watch this kingdom burn. 300 witnesses. One public execution of her heart. But when the Alpha King himself stepped from the shadows and declared, "Then I claim her," the game changed forever. What happened next that night would shatter a dynasty, crown an orphan queen, and prove that the cruelest rejection can become the most dangerous second chance. If you want to see how a girl with nothing became the most feared woman in the werewolf kingdom, stay until the end. Drop a like, tell me what city you're watching from, and let's dive into a night that rewrote history. The Valerius estate gleamed like a fallen star against the midnight forest, every window blazing with golden light, every terrace crowded with the most powerful werewolves in the northern territories. The Ascension Ball happened once a generation, a night when unmated wolves gathered under the full moon's blessing, when fated bonds snapped into place like lightning finding ground, when futures were written in the space between heartbeats. Sienna Mercer smoothed her hands down the silver dress she'd borrowed from the charity closet at St. Raphael's home for displaced wolves, trying to still the trembling in her fingers. The gown was beautiful, probably donated by some wealthy she-wolf who'd worn it once and forgotten about it, but it hung slightly wrong on Sienna's smaller frame, the hemline altered hastily with thread that didn't quite match. She didn't belong here. Every instinct screamed it. The other orphans from St. Raphael's had laughed when Matron Carr announced they'd each receive one invitation to the ball. Charity cases mixing with royalty, Marcus had sneered, his lip curling. They'll smell the poverty on us before we clear the door. But Sienna had felt something different when she held that cream-colored invitation with its gold-embossed seal. A pulling, a certainty that thrummed through her blood like a second heartbeat. Her wolf, quiet most of the time, smaller than it should be, had lifted its head for the first time in months and howled. Now standing at the base of the grand marble staircase that swept up to the ballroom's entrance, Sienna understood why. Prince Liam Valerius stood at the top of those stairs. He was beautiful in the way dangerous things are beautiful, all sharp edges and predatory grace. His dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved by someone who understood exactly how to make human hearts stop. He wore midnight blue, formal, and perfectly tailored, and he stood with the casual arrogance of someone who'd never questioned his place in the world. Their eyes met. The bond slammed into Sienna like a physical blow. Her knees buckled and she grabbed the marble balustrade to keep from falling. Heat flooded through her, followed by a recognition so profound it felt like remembering something she'd known before she was born. Mate! Her wolf surged forward, pressing against her skin, desperate and yearning and certain. And from the way Liam's entire body went rigid, from the way his nostrils flared and his hands clenched at his sides, she knew he felt it too. For one perfect, crystalline moment, everything else fell away. The crowd, the music, the weight of every eye turning to follow the prince's staring, none of it mattered. There was only the pull, the bond, the absolute rightness of finding the other half of your soul. Then Liam's expression changed. The wonder that had flashed across his face, brief as lightning, twisted into something cold, something cruel. He looked at her like she was a stain on his perfect evening, and when he spoke, his voice carried across the sudden hush that had fallen over the nearest guests. No. One word. Simple. Devastating. Sienna's heart lurched. Wait. But Liam was already moving, descending the stairs with deliberate grace, each step bringing him closer while somehow creating more distance. The crowd parted for him like water, wolves of noble blood stepping aside for their future king, their murmurs building like approaching thunder. Did you feel that? The prince? Who is she? Nobody. Look at her dress. Liam stopped 3 steps above her, close enough that she could smell cedar and winter wind and power that made her wolf whimper. Close enough to see the golden flecks in his amber eyes, the slight curl of his lip. You felt it, Sienna whispered. It wasn't a question. The bond thrummed between them, visible to anyone with eyes to see, a golden thread that fate itself had woven. You know what this means. I know exactly what it means. Liam's voice was silk over steel. It means the moon goddess has a sick sense of humor. The words hit like a slap. Around them, the crowd pressed closer, drawn by the scent of drama the way sharks are drawn to blood. Sienna saw them through the corner of her eye. Designer gowns and custom suits, diamonds at throats, and power radiating from every pore. The elite, the chosen, the wolves who'd been born knowing their place in the world. Not like her. Never like her. Prince Liam, she tried again, hating how small her voice sounded. The bond is a mistake. He cut her off with brutal efficiency, his gaze raking over her with obvious disdain. Look at you, an orphan in a borrowed dress, probably here on charity. You think I don't smell the institutional soap on your skin? The cheap detergent in that fabric? Heat flooded Sienna's cheeks, shame burning through her chest. She'd scrubbed herself raw in the St. Raphael's showers, had spent an hour trying to tame her wild dark hair into something presentable. She'd tried. That doesn't matter, she said, forcing strength into her voice. The mate bond matters less than bloodlines. Liam's interruption was sharp as a knife. Less than duty. Less than the kingdom that needs a queen worthy of standing beside its king. I could be... You could be what? Liam's laugh was cruel, and several wolves in the crowd echoed it, the sound rippling outward. Worthy? You're an orphan with no pack, no lineage, no training in politics or diplomacy. You probably can't even shift properly. The last observation hit like a killing blow because it was true. Sienna's wolf was small, her shifts incomplete and painful. The result of malnutrition in her early years, the pack healers at St. Raphael's had said, damage that might never fully heal. My wolf is weak. I can smell it on you. Liam's eyes flashed with something that might have been regret before contempt swallowed it whole. The kingdom needs an alpha queen, a powerful bloodline to strengthen the royal line. And you. He gestured dismissively at her, the movement encompassing everything she was and wasn't. You would dilute it, weaken everything my family has built. The crowd was openly staring now, hundreds of faces turning toward them, the music faltering as the orchestra caught the scent of scandal. Sienna saw shock on some faces, dark pleasure on others, and everywhere, the confirmation that Liam was right. She didn't belong here. Please. The word escaped before she could stop it, and she hated herself for it. Don't do this in front of everyone? Liam's smile was a razor. That's precisely why I'm doing it here. So there's no confusion, no hope, no pathetic fantasy where you convince yourself that an orphan could ever be my queen. He took another step down, close enough now that she could feel the heat of him, the terrible pull of the bond that was tearing her apart, even as he rejected it. His voice dropped, intimate and venomous. You are not worthy of being my mate, Sienna Mercer. You are not worthy of being this kingdom's queen. And you will never be worthy, no matter how desperately you wish otherwise. The words landed like physical blows, each one finding the softest, most vulnerable parts of her and driving deep. Sienna felt something crack in her chest, the bond fracturing under the weight of his rejection, pain flooding through her so intense she couldn't breathe. I, Prince Liam Valerius, reject... That's enough. The new voice cut through Liam's declaration like thunder cutting through silence. Deep, powerful, carrying a weight of authority that made every wolf in the ballroom, including the prince, freeze mid-breath. The crowd parted again, but differently this time. Not flowing aside with casual deference, but scattering, wolves pressing themselves against walls and pillars, heads dropping in automatic submission. Alpha King. Magnus Valerius walked through the space they'd created. Sienna had never seen him this close. The Alpha King rarely attended public functions anymore, preferring to rule from the shadows while his son played the public-facing prince. But there was no mistaking him. The same dark hair as Liam, but shot through with silver, the same aristocratic features, but harder, carved by decades of holding power. He moved like violence barely contained, like a storm deciding whether to break. And his eyes, ice blue where his son's were amber, locked onto Sienna with an intensity that stole what little breath she had left. Father? Liam's voice carried a note of surprise, but he didn't back down, didn't show weakness. This doesn't concern me? Magnus's tone could have frozen fire. You're rejecting your fated mate in the middle of the Ascension Ball, creating a spectacle that will be gossiped about for decades, and you think it doesn't concern me? She's not suitable. You don't decide what's suitable. Magnus reached the bottom of the stairs, and Sienna realized with a start that he was positioned between her and Liam now, his large frame blocking the prince's view of her. You're not king yet, boy, and until you are, you don't get to make declarations that affect the bloodline. Sienna's heart hammered against her ribs. She could smell Magnus now, pine and snow and something wild that made her wolf press forward again, curious despite everything. Look at her, Liam insisted, gesturing past his father. She's nobody, an orphan with no... I can see what she is. Magnus's interruption was quiet, deadly. The question is whether you can see what you're throwing away. I'm protecting the kingdom. You're protecting your pride. Magnus turned slightly, and for the first time Sienna saw his face in profile, saw the muscle ticking in his jaw. You're embarrassed that fate didn't give you some high-born she-wolf with the right pedigree, so you're throwing a tantrum in front of the entire elite class. That's not... It's exactly what you're doing. Magnus's gaze shifted, landing on Sienna with unexpected gentleness. What's your name, girl? Sienna. Her voice came out as barely a whisper. Sienna Mercer, Your Majesty. Mercer. Magnus's eyes narrowed slightly, something flickering across his expression too quickly to read. From St. Raphael's home? Yes, sir. And you felt the bond snap? With my son. There was no point in lying. Yes. Magnus nodded slowly, his attention never leaving her face, and Sienna had the unsettling feeling of being catalogued, assessed, and measured against some internal standard she couldn't see. Then he did something that made the entire ballroom gasp. He stepped closer to her, not threatening, not aggressive, but close enough that she could feel the power radiating off him in waves, close enough that her wolf should have been cowering in submission to the most dominant wolf in the territory. Instead, her wolf lifted its head again and howled. The sound, internal, soundless to human ears but resonant on some deeper level, made Magnus's eyes flash ice blue, made his nostrils flare, made him inhale sharply, scenting her, and freeze in a way that sent electricity crackling through the air. No, Liam said behind them, the word sharp with sudden understanding. No, that's not possible. But Magnus ignored his son, his entire focus on Sienna now, his expression shifting through surprise, recognition, and something that looked almost like wonder before iron control slammed back into place. It seems, Magnus said softly, his voice pitched for her ears alone, that my son isn't the only one fate has plans for tonight. Sienna's breath caught. I don't understand. You feel it. It wasn't a question. A second pull, different from the first. And goddess help her, she did. Underneath the fractured, aching bond with Liam, underneath the pain of rejection and the humiliation burning through her, there was something else. Newer, stronger. A pull toward the Alpha King that felt like gravity, like inevitability, like the moon calling the tides. This is insane, Liam snarled, pushing past his father. She can't be both our mates. That doesn't happen. It happens rarely, Magnus corrected, still watching Sienna. When the first bond is rejected before completion, when the moon goddess offers a second chance, when fate decides the first choice was wrong. I wasn't wrong. You rejected your fated mate because she wasn't born with silver in her mouth and titles after her name. Magnus's voice cracked like a whip. If that's not wrong, I don't know what is. Liam's face flushed with anger. You can't seriously be considering... I'm not considering anything. Magnus turned to face his son fully, and even Sienna felt the weight of his authority, the absolute power that made him Alpha King. I'm claiming what's mine. The ballroom erupted. Gasps, shouts, the sound of champagne glasses hitting marble as wolves surged forward, trying to see, trying to understand what was happening. Sienna heard fragments of conversation, shock, scandal, disbelief. But it all seemed distant, muffled, less real than the feeling of Magnus's hand suddenly wrapping around her wrist. His touch burned. Not painfully, but with the intensity of the bond snapping into full blazing life, stronger even than what she'd felt with Liam. Her wolf surged forward with a joy so profound it brought tears to her eyes, and she saw Magnus's pupils dilate, saw his control slip just enough to glimpse the wolf beneath. Mine, he said quietly, the word carrying centuries of dominance. Then louder to the crowd, I claim this woman as my mate. Let anyone who wishes to contest it step forward now. Silence. Absolute terrified silence. Even Liam had gone still, his face twisted with fury and something that might have been hurt. You can't, the prince said finally, but there was desperation in his voice now. She's my mate. The bond is broken. You rejected her. Magnus's grip on Sienna's wrist gentled, but he didn't let go. The moment you said those words, you severed fate's tie, and fate offered her to me instead. The council will never accept. The council will accept what I tell them to accept. Magnus's smile was all teeth. I'm still king, boy, and this woman is my fated mate. That makes her your queen, whether you like it or not. He turned back to Sienna, his expression softening in a way that made him look less like a predator and more like a man discovering something unexpected and precious. The question is, he said quietly, whether you'll accept me. I won't force this. You've been hurt enough tonight. Sienna's mind reeled. An hour ago, she'd been an orphan hoping for a glimpse of her fated mate. Now she was standing in front of the Alpha King, feeling a bond stronger than anything she'd imagined, being offered a position she'd never dreamed of. And in front of them both, Prince Liam watched with eyes full of rage. She struggled to form words. I don't know how to be a queen. Neither did I know how to be a king when I first took the throne. Magnus's thumb traced gentle circles on her inner wrist, over the pulse point that hammered against her skin. But I learned, and you will too. The kingdom will adjust. His certainty was absolute. Say yes, Sienna. Let me give you everything my son was too blind to see you deserve. It was petty. It was probably stupid, but when Sienna looked past Magnus to where Liam stood, the prince who'd called her unworthy, who'd humiliated her in front of hundreds, who'd rejected her with such casual cruelty, she felt something hard and bright crystallize in her chest. Fuck him. Yes, she said, meeting Magnus's ice-blue eyes. I accept. The bond roared to life between them, golden and fierce and undeniable. Magnus pulled her closer, one hand coming up to cup her face with surprising gentleness, and when he leaned down to press his forehead to hers, she felt the full weight of his power settle over her like a mantle. Then let's make it official, he murmured. He turned, keeping Sienna tucked against his side, facing the ballroom full of shocked, staring wolves. His voice rang out with absolute authority. I, Magnus Valerius, Alpha King of the Northern Territories, claim Sienna Mercer as my fated mate and future queen. Let the bond be witnessed and sealed. He raised his wrist to his mouth and bit down, sharp canines piercing skin, blood welling dark and rich. Then he offered it to Sienna. She knew what this meant. The claiming bite, the blood oath, the public declaration that would bind them in ways even deeper than the mate bond. Once she accepted, there would be no going back. Sienna looked at that offered wrist, at the blood that carried the Alpha King's power, and then at Liam's face. Pale now, stricken, finally understanding what he'd lost. She leaned forward and set her teeth against Magnus's skin. The taste of his blood was copper and lightning, power flooding through her system like liquid fire. Her wolf sang, rising up stronger than it had ever been, fed by the Alpha King's strength. She felt Magnus's hand tighten on her shoulder, heard his sharp intake of breath, and when she pulled back, she saw her own blood on his lips where he'd completed the reciprocal bite at her throat. The bond sealed with a snap that echoed through the supernatural realm, visible to every wolf present as a blaze of golden light that surrounded them both. It's done, Magnus said, and his smile was savage. Sienna Mercer is my mate, my queen, and under my protection. Let anyone who wishes to challenge that step forward. No one moved. No one even breathed, except Liam, who stared at them with eyes full of betrayal and fury, his hands clenched so tight his knuckles had gone white. You'll regret this, he said quietly, the words directed at both of them. Both of you will regret this night. Then he turned and walked away, the crowd parting hastily to let him pass, and Sienna watched him go with her hand pressed to the claiming bite on her throat, feeling the phantom ache of a rejected bond and the fierce joy of a new one in equal measure. Don't mind him, Magnus murmured against her ear, He'll come around eventually, or he won't. Either way, you're mine now. Yours, Sienna's wolf agreed, pressing against her skin with contentment. Magnus guided her up the stairs, through the ballroom where wolves bowed and curtsied as they passed, some with genuine respect, others with barely concealed hostility. Sienna felt their stares like brands, heard the whispers that followed in their wake. Orphan queen, gold digger. She seduced the king to get back at the prince, but Magnus's hand was steady at the small of her back, his presence a wall of protection between her and the worst of it, and Sienna lifted her chin and walked like she belonged there, even if she had no idea what she'd just gotten herself into. They reached a private terrace, blessedly empty, the sounds of the ball muted behind heavy glass doors. The moon hung full and massive overhead, bathing everything in silver light, and Sienna finally allowed herself to breathe. "That was insane," she said. "That was necessary." Magnus leaned against the marble balustrade, his posture relaxed now that they were alone, though his eyes tracked every shadow with predatory awareness. "Liam would have destroyed you with that rejection, made you a pariah. You'd have spent the rest of your life as the she-wolf rejected by a prince. So instead, I'm the she-wolf who became queen out of spite? You became queen because fate decreed it." Magnus's gaze was steady. "The bond doesn't lie, Sienna. What you feel for me, what I feel for you, it's real. It would have happened eventually, even without Liam's rejection. You don't know that. I've lived long enough to recognize truth when it bites me." His smile was wry. "And you definitely bite." Despite everything, Sienna felt her lips twitch. "I didn't know what else to do." "You did perfectly." Magnus pushed off the balustrade, closing the distance between them in 2 strides. Up close, she could see the fine lines at the corners of his eyes, the silver threading through his dark hair. He was older than Liam by decades, older than her by more than she wanted to calculate, but the bond sang between them with ageless certainty. "I'm terrified," she admitted. "Good. So am I." At her startled look, Magnus chuckled. "I haven't had a mate in over 20 years, Sienna. My first queen died when Liam was young. I'd accepted I would rule alone until I passed the throne to my son. And then you walked into that ballroom and everything changed. Your son hates me. My son is an arrogant fool who just learned a very expensive lesson about the cost of pride." Magnus's expression hardened. "He'll get over it, or he won't. Either way, you're under my protection now. No one touches you, no one threatens you, and anyone who tries to use you to get to me or the throne will answer to my wolf." The casual violence in his tone should have scared her. Instead, it made her feel safer than she had in years. "I don't know how to be a queen," Sienna said again. "I don't know politics or diplomacy or how to navigate high society. I'm going to make mistakes, then make them." Magnus tilted her chin up with gentle fingers. "Make mistakes, learn from them, and become stronger. That's all any of us can do. But don't apologize for what you are, Sienna. Don't let anyone make you feel lesser because you didn't grow up with a silver spoon in your mouth. Everyone in there thinks I seduced you. Everyone in there is an idiot." His thumb traced the line of her jaw. "And even if you had seduced me, which, for the record, you didn't need to, the bond did that all on its own, it would be my choice, my decision, and no one questions the Alpha King's decisions. Liam will. Liam has been questioning my decisions since he learned to talk." Magnus sighed. "He's proud, ambitious, and convinced he knows better than everyone around him, including fate, apparently, but he's still my son, and eventually he'll have to accept that you're his queen." He called me weak. "Your wolf is smaller than average. That's not the same as weak." Magnus's hand slid from her jaw to her shoulder, warm and reassuring. "Besides, I've seen plenty of strong wolves with weak hearts. I'd take a loyal wolf with a fierce spirit over a powerful one with no courage any day." Sienna felt something tight in her chest loosen. "You don't even know me. I know you stood in front of 300 elite wolves and took my son's cruelest words without breaking. I know you accepted a bond with a king you'd never met because you were brave enough to trust fate. I know your wolf sang when it sensed mine, and that's more than enough for me." He was standing very close now, close enough that she could feel his body heat, smell the pine and snow scent of him mixing with the copper tang of blood from their claiming bites. The bond hummed between them, urging them closer, and Sienna felt her breath catch as Magnus's hand slid into her hair. "I should probably court you properly," he murmured. "Take you to dinner, bring you flowers, pretend we have time for the traditional dances. But I'm a selfish bastard who's been alone too long, and my wolf is screaming at me to mark you properly and damn the consequences." His eyes had gone ice blue again, wolf rising to the surface. "Tell me to stop, Sienna. Tell me you need time, and I'll give it to you. But if you don't—" She kissed him. It was clumsy and desperate, and nothing like the elegant seduction she'd read about in books. But Magnus responded instantly, his arms coming around her, lifting her against him as he deepened the kiss with a hunger that stole her breath. Sienna felt the bond flare between them, felt his wolf and hers tangling together, and when his teeth scraped over her lower lip, she gasped. "Inside," Magnus growled against her mouth. "Now, before I scandalize the entire ball by taking you right here on this terrace." He didn't wait for an answer, just swept her into his arms and carried her through a side door she hadn't noticed, down a corridor lit with crystal sconces, up a private staircase that wound through the heart of the estate. Sienna clung to his shoulders, her heart racing, the reality of what was happening finally sinking in. She was about to sleep with the Alpha King, her mate, her husband, by the laws of their kind, from the moment they'd completed the claiming bite. Magnus shouldered through a heavy oak door into a suite that was all masculine elegance, dark wood furniture, deep blue fabrics, windows overlooking the moonlit forest. He set her down gently beside the massive bed, his hands coming up to frame her face. "Last chance," he said quietly. "We can wait. Do this properly. I'll give you time to adjust." "I don't want to wait." Sienna's hands found the buttons of his formal jacket, fumbling only slightly. "I've been alone my whole life, Magnus. I don't want to be alone tonight." His control shattered. What followed was a blur of sensation, hands on skin, clothes discarded, the slide of his body against hers as he bore her down onto the bed. Magnus touched her like she was precious, like she might break, his mouth trailing fire along her throat, her collarbone lower. Sienna arched under him, her wolf surging forward with feral joy as his teeth found the junction of her neck and shoulder. The mating bite, when it came, was both pain and pleasure, so intense she screamed. Magnus's power flooded through her, strengthening her wolf, binding them together in ways that went deeper than blood or oath or any human understanding. She felt his emotions, desire and possessiveness, and a fierce protectiveness that made her eyes burn with tears, and knew he could feel hers too. "Mine," his wolf snarled. "Mine," hers agreed. And when they finally came together, when Magnus pushed into her with a gentleness that contrasted sharply with the wildness in his eyes, Sienna felt the last piece of the bond snap into place. They moved together like they'd been made for this, like their bodies had been waiting lifetimes to find each other. Magnus was patient, thorough, wringing pleasure from her until she sobbed with it. And when he finally let go, when his control fractured and his wolf rose to the surface, Sienna held on and met him beat for beat. The climax, when it hit, was shared through the bond, doubling and redoubling until Sienna wasn't sure where she ended and Magnus began. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the moonlight, Magnus's hand tracing lazy patterns on her hip, Sienna's head resting on his chest where she could hear his heartbeat gradually slowing. "No going back now," Magnus murmured into her hair. "Did you want to go back?" "Not even a little." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "But you should know what you've gotten yourself into." "Being queen isn't going to be easy, Sienna. There will be wolves who resent you, who see you as an outsider, who'll do everything they can to undermine you. Like your son? Liam is complicated. He's been raised to be king since birth. Having his mate, his rejected mate, become his stepmother is going to wound his pride in ways I'm not sure he can handle gracefully." Magnus's chest rose and fell with a deep breath. "But he's also my heir, my blood, and eventually we'll have to find a way to make this work." "What if we can't?" "Then we'll deal with that when it comes." Magnus's arms tightened around her. "For now, focus on surviving the next few weeks. There will be ceremonies, presentations, a formal coronation. The council will want to meet you, assess you, try to find weaknesses to exploit." "That sounds terrible." "It will be. but you won't face it alone. He shifted, rolling to pin her beneath him, his ice blue eyes serious. I meant what I said earlier. You're under my protection. My power backs you, my authority supports you, and anyone who tries to harm you answers to me personally. Sienna felt the truth of it through the bond, felt his absolute commitment, and something fierce and bright bloomed in her chest. I won't let you down, she promised. You couldn't if you tried. Magnus's smile was warm, genuine, so different from the cold authority he wore in public. Now sleep. Tomorrow we face the kingdom together. Tonight, you're just mine. Sienna closed her eyes, tucked against his warmth, feeling safer than she had since her parents died when she was 6 years old and left her alone in a world that had no place for orphan wolves. She slept, and dreamed of golden bonds and ice-blue eyes, and a future that terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. Miles away, in another wing of the vast estate, Prince Liam Valerius stood at his window and stared out at the same moon that illuminated his father's suite. His chest ached where the bond had fractured. The pain of rejection turned inward now, feeding on itself. He thought he was doing the right thing, the smart thing. An orphan with no pack, no bloodline, no training had no business being queen, but the look on his father's face when he'd claimed Sienna, the way the bond had flared between them, stronger than anything Liam had felt. I made a mistake, a small voice whispered in his mind. No, he'd been right. Sienna Mercer was unsuitable. The fact that his father had swooped in didn't change that. It just meant Magnus was thinking with his wolf instead of his head, letting the bond cloud his judgment. And when it all fell apart, when Sienna proved herself incapable of ruling, when the kingdom rejected her, when the council moved against her, Liam would be there to pick up the pieces. He'd be proven right. He had to be. Because the alternative, that he'd thrown away his fated mate for pride and prejudice, that he'd rejected the one person meant for him in all the world, was too terrible to contemplate. Liam's hands clenched on the window frame hard enough to make the wood creak. Tomorrow, he'd start laying the groundwork, finding allies among the council members who already distrusted Magnus's impulsive decision. Building a case against the orphan queen, proving that he'd been right all along. It was the only way forward, the only way to salvage his pride from the wreckage of this disastrous night. And if a part of him still ached for the girl in the silver dress, the one whose eyes had looked at him like he hung the moon before he'd crushed that light with cruel words, well, that was just the price of being a prince. Liam turned from the window and headed for his desk, pulling out parchment and pen. Time to write some letters. Time to remind the kingdom's power players that just because the old wolf had claimed a new mate didn't mean the future king was any less committed to the throne, and time to make Sienna Mercer wish she'd never stepped foot in the Valerius estate. Dawn came too early, pale light filtering through the heavy curtains of Magnus's suite and pulling Sienna from dreams that tangled memory with fantasy. For one blissful moment, she forgot where she was, forgot everything that had happened. Then she felt the weight of Magnus's arm across her waist, the unfamiliar softness of silk sheets against her skin, and reality crashed back with the force of a tidal wave. She was in the Alpha King's bed. She was his mate. She was going to be queen. Panic fluttered in her chest like a trapped bird, but before it could take hold, Magnus stirred beside her, his arm tightening possessively even in sleep. Through the bond, still new, still strange, she felt his contentment, his wolf's satisfaction at having its mate close and safe. The feeling steadied her, somewhat. Sienna eased out from under his arm and padded to the bathroom, trying not to think about how her borrowed dress lay in a torn heap on the floor, how she had nothing to wear, how in a few hours the entire kingdom would know exactly what had happened in this room. The bathroom was larger than her entire dormitory space at St. Raphael's, all marble and gold fixtures and mirrors that showed her exactly how thoroughly she'd been marked. The claiming bite at her throat had already healed to a silvery scar, the mate bond ensuring rapid recovery. But there were other marks, bruises on her hips, her thighs, evidence of Magnus's passion that made heat flood her cheeks. She looked like she'd been claimed by a wolf, which, technically, she had been. Sienna splashed cold water on her face and tried to organize her spiraling thoughts. She needed clothes. She needed to figure out what came next. She needed to not completely humiliate herself in front of the wolves who already thought she was a gold-digging orphan who'd seduced their king. You're panicking. She spun to find Magnus leaning in the doorway, wearing only sleep pants that hung low on his hips, his muscled torso marked with scars that told stories of decades spent fighting for and defending his throne. His hair was mussed from sleep, and without the formal clothes and carefully controlled authority, he looked younger, more approachable. Still terrifying, but in a different way. I'm not panicking, Sienna lied. You're broadcasting your emotions through the bond loud enough to wake me from a dead sleep. Magnus crossed to her in 3 strides, his hands settling on her shoulders with gentle certainty. Talk to me. I don't have anything to wear. I don't know what I'm supposed to do today. Her voice cracked. I don't know how to be this person everyone expects me to be. Then don't be that person. Magnus turned her to face the mirror, standing behind her so she could see them both reflected. The powerful king and the small orphan girl who somehow fit against him like she'd been designed for exactly this spot. Be yourself. The wolf who took my son's cruelest words and still stood tall. The woman brave enough to accept a bond with a stranger because fate demanded it. That woman was terrified. Being brave doesn't mean not being afraid. It means being afraid and doing it anyway. His hand slid down her arms, his chin resting on top of her head. As for clothes and schedules and all the practical concerns, I have staff for that. You won't be thrown to the wolves unprepared, Sienna. I promise you that much. A knock at the door made Sienna tense, but Magnus squeezed her shoulders reassuringly before calling out, Enter. An older woman swept in, her silver hair pulled back in an elegant knot, her bearing radiating competence and something that might have been disapproval. She took in the scene, the rumpled bed, Sienna's state of undress, the obvious claiming marks, with a single comprehensive glance before dropping into a perfect curtsy. Your Majesty, I've taken the liberty of preparing a wardrobe for your mate and arranging for breakfast in the private dining room. The council has requested an audience at noon. Of course they have. Magnus sighed. Thank you, Helena. Sienna, this is Helena Cross, my head of household. She's been running this estate since before I was born, and she knows where every body is buried. Literally, in some cases. Helena's lips twitched. Your Majesty is too kind. Miss Mercer, if you'll come with me, we'll get you properly attired for the day ahead. Sienna looked at Magnus, who nodded encouragingly. Go. I'll handle the morning briefings and meet you for breakfast. Helena will take care of you. The older woman's expression gave nothing away, but Sienna caught the sharp assessment in her eyes as she followed her out of the suite and down a corridor that seemed to stretch forever. They passed servants who pressed themselves against walls and dropped their gazes, past windows that overlooked manicured gardens, past portraits of long-dead Valerius wolves who stared down with judgment in their painted eyes. Helena finally stopped at a door carved with intricate wolf designs and pushed it open to reveal a suite that rivaled Magnus's in size, if not masculine severity. This room was done in soft grays and silvers, elegant and understated, with windows that faced east to catch the morning sun. These will be your private quarters, Helena said, moving through the space with brisk efficiency. His Majesty's suite connects through that door, should you wish to share his bed, but a queen requires her own space for propriety's sake. Your wardrobe has been stocked with essentials, though we'll need to schedule fittings for formal gowns and ceremonial dress. Sienna stared at the massive closet Helena had opened, revealing rows of clothes that probably cost more than she'd seen in her entire life. How did you... This was all done in one night. I've been preparing these rooms since His Majesty's first queen passed. Helena's voice softened fractionally. We'd hoped he'd find another mate eventually. I simply updated the wardrobe this morning based on your measurements from last night's dress. The borrowed dress that got torn. The borrowed dress that served its purpose. Helena pulled out a simple but elegant day dress in deep blue. This will do for breakfast and the council meeting. Understated, appropriate, and the color brings out your eyes. Now sit. We need to do something about your hair. For the next hour, Sienna submitted to Helena's efficient ministrations. Her wild dark hair was tamed into a sleek style that managed to look both elegant and effortless. Subtle makeup enhanced features she'd never thought much about, and the dress fit like it had been made for her body. When Helena finally let her look in the mirror, Sienna barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked like she belonged in a palace. Better, Helena said with satisfaction. Now, some rules before you face the vipers in the council chamber. Rules? Never apologize for what you are. Never explain yourself to wolves of lesser rank. Never show weakness, even when you feel it. Helena's eyes met hers in the mirror, steel beneath the polish. You're the Alpha King's mate, which makes you the most powerful she-wolf in this kingdom. Act like it, even if you have to fake it at first. You don't think I can do this, Sienna said quietly. You think I'm unsuitable, just like everyone else. So I think you're an orphan with no training who's been thrust into a position that breaks wolves with decades of preparation. Helena's honesty was brutal. But I also think His Majesty chose you, which means there's more to you than meets the eye. Whether that's enough remains to be seen. It wasn't encouragement, but it wasn't outright hostility either. Sienna would take it. The council will test you today, Helena continued, gathering up discarded clothes. They'll ask questions designed to make you look foolish, probe for weaknesses, try to determine if you're a temporary infatuation or a genuine threat to their power structures. Don't let them rattle you. How am I supposed to answer questions about pack law and kingdom politics when I don't know anything? You don't answer them. Helena's smile was sharp. You redirect, defer to His Majesty, or turn the question back on them. You're new to the role. No one expects you to be an expert overnight, but they will expect you to show backbone. A soft knock interrupted them, and a young servant entered with a curtsy. Begging your pardon, Miss Cross, but His Majesty requests Miss Mercer's presence for breakfast. She's ready. Helena gave Sienna one last critical look. Remember, backbone. The moment they sense weakness, they'll devour you. Encouraging. Sienna followed the servant through more endless corridors until they reached a smaller dining room, intimate by palace standards, where Magnus waited. He dressed in formal attire again, deep charcoal that made his ice-blue eyes even more striking. And when he saw her, his expression shifted from neutral authority to something warmer. Beautiful, he said simply, pulling out a chair for her. Helena's work? She's terrifying. She's loyal, which is more valuable than charm. Magnus settled into his own chair as servants appeared with covered platters. She'll also be your greatest asset in navigating court politics. Listen to her advice. Breakfast was a spread that could have fed everyone at St. Raphael's for a week. Fresh pastries, exotic fruits, perfectly cooked meats. Sienna's stomach growled, reminding her she hadn't eaten since yesterday afternoon, and Magnus chuckled. Eat. The council meeting will run long and you'll need your strength. Sienna reached for a pastry, hyper-aware of the servants hovering nearby. Do they always watch like this? Yes, you'll get used to it. Magnus dismissed them with a gesture, and they melted away, leaving them in relative privacy. How are you feeling? Truly? The bond hummed between them, making lies impossible. Overwhelmed, terrified, like I'm about to walk into a room full of wolves who want me dead. Some of them probably do, Magnus said with brutal honesty. The council is made up of the oldest, most powerful families in the kingdom. They've held their positions for generations, and they don't like change. You represent change. I represent an orphan sleeping her way to power. You represent my mate, chosen by fate, sealed by blood oath, and claiming bite. Magnus's voice hardened. Anyone who suggests otherwise will answer to me personally. But yes, they'll try to undermine you, make you doubt yourself, turn you into a puppet they can control or a scapegoat they can sacrifice. That's supposed to make me feel better? It's supposed to prepare you. Magnus leaned forward, his gaze intense. I won't lie to you, Sienna. This life is brutal. The politics are cutthroat. The expectations are crushing, and there will be days when you question whether any of this was worth it. But you don't face it alone. I'm with you. My power backs you. And anyone who tries to hurt you goes through me first. The absolute certainty in his voice steadied her, somewhat. What if I fail? What if I say the wrong thing or make a mistake that damages the kingdom? Then we'll fix it together. Magnus reached across the table to take her hand. You're allowed to make mistakes, Sienna. You're allowed to learn. What you're not allowed to do is let them break you. Promise me that much. She nodded, throat tight. They finished breakfast in silence, the weight of the coming meeting pressing down on both of them. Too soon, Helena returned with another servant in tow. The council has assembled, Your Majesty. Magnus rose, offering Sienna his arm with formal courtesy. Ready? No, not even slightly. But she placed her hand on his arm anyway and let him lead her toward whatever fresh hell awaited. The council chamber was exactly as intimidating as Sienna had feared. A massive room dominated by a circular table carved from ancient oak, high windows letting in cold northern light, and seats filled with wolves who radiated power and barely concealed hostility. She counted 12 of them, 6 men and 6 women, all dressed in formal attire that screamed old money and older bloodlines. Every eye turned to her as Magnus entered, and Sienna felt the weight of their assessment like a physical thing. She kept her spine straight, her expression neutral, channeling every bit of advice Helena had given her. Backbone. Don't show weakness. You're the Alpha King's mate. Magnus guided her to a seat beside his at the head of the table, and even that simple act caused a ripple of reaction through the assembled wolves. The previous queen's chair, Sienna realized, empty for over 20 years. Until now. Counselors, Magnus began without preamble, his voice carrying absolute authority. I'm sure news has already reached you, but let me make it official. This is Sienna Mercer, my fated mate and your future queen. The claiming has been completed, the bond sealed. I expect her to be treated with the respect due her position. A heavy silence followed. Then a woman at Magnus's left, gray-haired, sharp-eyed, wearing enough diamonds to fund a small country, leaned forward. Lady Cordelia Ashford, she introduced herself, though her tone suggested Sienna should have already known. Tell me, Miss Mercer, what experience do you have in governance, in pack law, in the diplomatic relationships that keep this kingdom stable? Here it comes. None, Sienna said simply, meeting the older woman's gaze. I'm sure you already know my background, Lady Ashford, but I'm here to learn. Learning takes time. The kingdom doesn't have the luxury of waiting while you figure out how to be queen. Cordelia's smile was razor sharp. Perhaps a regent arrangement would be more appropriate until what? Magnus's interruption was quiet but deadly. Until you and your fellow counselors decide my mate has been properly trained to your satisfaction? I don't recall asking for your approval. We're merely suggesting that Miss Mercer might benefit from guidance. She'll have my guidance. She doesn't need yours. A man across the table cleared his throat, younger than Cordelia but still graying at the temples, wearing a military uniform decorated with medals. Lord Commander Garrett Stone, with respect, Your Majesty, the kingdom has concerns. Prince Liam was publicly humiliated last night. The succession has been thrown into chaos. And we know nothing about this woman except that she appeared at a ball and somehow convinced you to claim her within hours. Somehow convinced me, Magnus repeated softly, and even Sienna felt the danger in his tone. Are you suggesting my mate used unnatural means to influence me, Commander? I'm suggesting it's unprecedented, and the timing was fate's, not hers. Magnus's hand found Sienna's under the table, squeezing gently. The mate bond doesn't lie. It doesn't manipulate. It simply is. And anyone questioning its legitimacy is questioning fate itself. We're questioning her suitability, another counselor spoke up, this one a severe-looking woman with steel-gray hair. Duchess Evelyn Blackwood, our kingdom needs a strong queen, Your Majesty. One who can stand beside you in battle, who can command respect from the packs, who can produce powerful heirs. This girl is careful, Magnus warned. But Duchess Blackwood pressed on. She's weak. Look at her. I can smell it from here. A stunted wolf, probably damaged from malnutrition. What happens when she's challenged? When she needs to defend her position, she'll fold like paper. The words hit like physical blows, each one finding the insecurities Sienna had carried her entire life. Her wolf whimpered, pressing close, and she felt Magnus's rage building through the bond. My wolf's size is not a reflection of my strength, Sienna heard herself say. The words came out steadier than she felt. And I'd rather be underestimated than be a bully who mistakes cruelty for power, Duchess. Dead silence. Duchess Blackwood's eyes flashed. How dare you? Answer a direct insult with truth? Sienna's heart hammered, but Helena's words echoed in her mind. Backbone. You called me weak to my face. I called you cruel. If you can't handle that, perhaps you shouldn't dish it out. Several counselors looked shocked. A few appeared almost amused, and Magnus, Magnus was fighting a smile. This is exactly what we feared, Cordelia interjected, her voice dripping with false concern. A common girl with no understanding of proper decorum, no respect for established hierarchy. I respect hierarchy just fine. Sienna cut her off, adrenaline overriding caution. What I don't respect is being talked about like I'm not in the room while you all decide whether I'm good enough for a position fate already gave me. Fate makes mistakes, the Lord Commander said flatly. Does it? Sienna turned to him. Because I'm looking at a council full of wolves who seem awfully invested in overruling fate's decision. Makes me wonder what you're really afraid of. We're afraid of weakness at the highest level of power, Duchess Blackwood snapped. We're afraid of a queen who'll crumble the first time she faces real opposition. We're afraid that in your desperation to escape poverty, you've manipulated our king into a bond that will destroy this kingdom. I didn't manipulate anyone. Then prove it. The Duchess leaned forward, her smile predatory. Shift for us. Right here. Show us this wolf you claim is strong enough to be queen. Sienna's blood ran cold. Her wolf was small, stunted from years of inadequate nutrition and care. Shifting in front of these powerful wolves would only confirm every cruel thing they'd said about her. That's enough. Magnus's voice cracked like a whip. My mate doesn't need to prove anything to you. Her bond with me is proof enough. With respect, Your Majesty, it's not. Cordelia's tone was syrup over steel. A queen must command respect on her own merits, not hide behind her mate's power. If she can't even shift without fear, I'll do it. The words left Sienna's mouth before her brain caught up. Before Magnus could object. Before common sense could override the hot rush of pride and fury burning through her veins. Every eye in the room locked onto her. You don't have to do this, Magnus said quietly, for her ears only. Yes, I do. Sienna stood, pushing her chair back. They'll never respect me otherwise. She could feel Magnus's reluctance through the bond, his desire to protect her warring with his understanding that she was right. If she backed down now, she'd always be the weak orphan who needed her mate to fight her battles. Sienna moved to an open space in the chamber, hyper-aware of the 12 pairs of eyes tracking her every movement. Her hands trembled as she reached for her wolf, that small, fragile presence that had always been more hindrance than help. Please, she thought desperately, please be strong today. The shift started rough, her bones grinding and reforming with more pain than it should have caused. Sienna gritted her teeth against the urge to cry out, refusing to show weakness, and pushed through the agony until fur rippled across her skin and her body compressed into her wolf form. She was small. Smaller than any wolf in this room, probably smaller than any wolf who'd held a position of power in the kingdom's history. Her coat was dark gray, unremarkable, and when she caught sight of herself reflected in the polished table, she looked like exactly what she was, a runt. The silence that followed was damning. Then Duchess Blackwood laughed. Actually laughed, the sound echoing off the stone walls. That? That's what you expect us to accept as our queen? I've seen pups larger than... She never finished the sentence. Magnus shifted. One moment he was seated at the table, human and controlled. The next, a massive black wolf stood where he'd been, easily 3 times Sienna's size, power radiating off him in waves that made even the counselors shrink back. He patted across the space separating them and pressed his body against Sienna's smaller form, a low growl rumbling from his chest that was clearly directed at anyone who might object. Mine, the gesture said. Touch her and die. Through the bond, Sienna felt his fury, his protectiveness, his absolute conviction that she was exactly where she belonged. And something in her wolf responded to that certainty, drawing strength from it, standing taller despite her small size. Magnus shifted back first, human again in seconds, not even bothering with modesty as he stood naked and unbothered in front of the entire council. Size, he said softly, dangerously, is not strength. I've killed wolves twice my size who thought their bulk made them powerful. I've seen pups with more courage than warriors triple their weight. And I'll be damned if I let a council of comfortable politicians tell my mate she's not good enough because her wolf doesn't meet your aesthetic standards. He snapped his fingers, and a servant rushed forward with a robe. Magnus shrugged into it, never taking his eyes off the assembled counselors. Sienna is my mate. Sienna will be your queen. And anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me personally, outside, in the old way. A challenge. Formal, binding, and absolutely serious. No one moved, because challenging the Alpha King to single combat was suicide, and they all knew it. Good. Magnus's smile was all teeth. Then I believe this meeting is over. You have your introduction to your queen. Learn to live with it. He turned to Sienna, still in wolf form, and offered his hand. She shifted back quickly, grateful when another servant appeared with a robe for her, and let Magnus pull her to her feet. They walked out of the council chamber together, leaving 12 stunned wolves in their wake, and didn't speak until they'd reached the privacy of Magnus's study. Then Sienna's legs gave out. Magnus caught her before she hit the floor, lowering her carefully to the leather couch, his hands gentle as they checked her over. "Are you hurt? Did the shift?" "I'm fine." Her voice shook. "I'm fine. That was... You were magnificent." Magnus pressed a kiss to her forehead. "You stood up to them, called them on their manipulation, and shifted even knowing it would make you vulnerable. That took more courage than anything they've done in decades. I looked ridiculous. You looked brave. There's a difference." He settled beside her, pulling her against his chest. "I'm sorry. Should have warned you how brutal they'd be." Would it have changed anything? Probably not. His arms tightened around her. "But I hate that you had to face that alone." "I wasn't alone. You were there." Sienna closed her eyes, exhaustion crashing over her. "Did I make things worse? Challenging them like that?" "You made things interesting, which is better than letting them think you're a doormat they can walk over." Magnus was quiet for a moment. "But yes, you've made enemies today, powerful ones. They'll be watching for any mistake, any weakness they can exploit." "Great. Welcome to palace politics." His tone was wry. "For what it's worth, you handled yourself better than I expected. Most wolves would have crumbled under that kind of pressure." Sienna thought about the orphanage, about years of being the smallest, the weakest, the one everyone overlooked or pitied, about learning to survive on scraps and willpower when nothing else was available. "I've had practice being underestimated," she said quietly. Magnus tilted her chin up, his ice blue eyes serious. "Then use it. Let them underestimate you. Let them think you're just a weak little orphan who got lucky. And when they move against you, and they will, you'll be ready. I don't know how to play these games. You learn. Fast." He pressed another kiss to her temple. "Starting tomorrow, you'll begin formal training. Etiquette, pack law, diplomacy, combat. Everything you need to survive in this world." "Combat?" "You saw how they reacted to your wolf. If you can't shift into something that intimidates them, you need to be able to fight in human form well enough that they think twice before challenging you." Magnus's expression was grim. "This isn't a fairy tale, Sienna. Being queen means being ready to defend your position with blood if necessary." The weight of it settled over her like a physical thing. This wasn't just about wearing pretty dresses and attending balls. This was survival. War by politics and social maneuvering, with her life and Magnus's reign hanging in the balance. "What if I can't do it?" The question escaped before she could stop it. "Then we'll face the consequences together." Magnus stood, pulling her with him. "But I have faith you're stronger than you think. You've survived this long against impossible odds. You'll survive this too." Sienna wanted to believe him. She really did. But as they left the study and headed back toward their suites, she caught sight of a familiar figure at the end of the corridor. Prince Liam stood in shadow, watching them with eyes that burned with something between hatred and longing. When their gazes met, he smiled, cold and promising. Then he turned and disappeared around a corner, leaving Sienna with the certain knowledge that the council wasn't her only enemy in this palace. Not by a long shot. The training began at dawn the next morning, brutal and unforgiving as the northern winter that howled outside the palace walls. Sienna woke to Helena shaking her shoulder, the older woman's expression brooking no argument. "Up, you have 15 minutes to dress and eat before your first session." Magnus had already left, called away to handle some crisis at the eastern border, and the empty space beside her in the bed felt like a bad omen. Through the bond, she could feel his distraction, his focus pulled in a dozen different directions, and underneath it all, a current of worry he was trying to shield from her. Not a great start to the day. The first trainer was a severe woman named Instructor Vargas, who looked like she'd been carved from granite and disappointment. She met Sienna in a private ballroom that had been cleared of furniture, wearing combat leathers that had seen decades of use. "Your Majesty," Vargas said, the title dripping with skepticism. "I've been tasked with teaching you to fight. Let's see what we're working with." What followed was 2 hours of humiliation. Sienna had never trained formally, had never learned to channel her wolf's strength into human combat, and it showed. Vargas moved like water and struck like lightning, putting Sienna on her back again and again until bruises bloomed across her ribs, and her pride lay in tatters on the polished floor. "Pathetic," Vargas declared after knocking her down for what felt like the 100th time. "You telegraph every move, you leave yourself open, and you have no killer instinct. A pup could take you down." Sienna pushed herself to her feet, tasting blood where she'd bitten her tongue. "Then teach me." "I can't teach what isn't there." Vargas circled her like a predator. "You're too soft, too hesitant. You pull your punches because you're afraid of hurting someone, which means you'll be the one who ends up hurt. Or dead." "I'm not afraid." Vargas moved. One moment she was 3 feet away, the next her hand was around Sienna's throat, slamming her into the wall hard enough to rattle her teeth. "Prove it. Fight back. Make me let go." Sienna's wolf snarled, surging forward, and she grabbed Vargas's wrist, trying to break the hold. But the instructor's grip was iron, her strength overwhelming, and black spots danced at the edges of Sienna's vision. "Fight!" Vargas snarled. Something snapped. Maybe it was the oxygen deprivation, maybe it was the accumulation of every humiliation since the ball, or maybe it was just survival instinct finally kicking in. Sienna stopped trying to break the grip, and instead drove her knee up into Vargas's ribs, then followed with an elbow to the face when the instructor's hold loosened. Vargas released her, stepping back with blood on her lip and something like approval in her eyes. Better, not good, but better. Again. The rest of the session was equally brutal, but Sienna stopped holding back, stopped being afraid of causing harm, and started fighting like her life depended on it. By the time Vargas called an end, both of them were bloody and bruised, and the instructor's nod felt like a hard-won victory. "You might survive after all," Vargas said, tossing Sienna a towel. "Same time tomorrow. Don't be late." Sienna barely had time to clean up before Helena appeared with the next tutor, an ancient wolf named Master Soren, who taught pack law and governance. He spoke in a monotone that made 2 hours feel like 2 years, drilling her on territory agreements and succession protocols until her head spun. Then came etiquette lessons with Lady Pemberton, who corrected everything from how Sienna held a fork to how she curtsied, each correction delivered with a sniff of disapproval. By the time afternoon arrived, Sienna was exhausted, bruised, and ready to crawl back into bed for a week. Instead, Helena informed her she had a public appearance. A what? The charity gala for the Northern Relief Fund. It was scheduled months ago, and His Majesty's attendance is mandatory. As his mate, you're expected to accompany him. Helena was already pulling formal gowns from the wardrobe. "This will be your first official appearance as future queen. Try not to embarrass yourself." The dress Helena selected was stunning, deep emerald green that brought out the unusual color of Sienna's eyes, fitted through the bodice before flowing into an elegant skirt. Sienna barely recognized herself in the mirror after Helena finished with her hair and makeup, transforming her from a battered trainee into something that looked almost regal. Almost. Magnus met her at the base of the grand staircase, looking devastating in formal black, and the way his eyes heated when he saw her helped settle some of her nerves. "You look incredible," he murmured, offering his arm. "I look like I'm playing dress-up in someone else's life." "You look like a queen." His hand covered hers where it rested on his arm. "How was your first day of training?" "Vargas tried to kill me. Soren bored me to death. And Lady Pemberton thinks I have the manners of a feral cat." Magnus's lips twitched. "So, about what I expected. You'll get better. Or die trying. That's the spirit." The gala was being held in the main ballroom, the same space where Liam had rejected her 3 nights ago. Sienna's stomach clenched as they entered, memories flooding back with visceral clarity. The humiliation, the pain, the moment her world had shattered. But this time was different. This time she entered on Magnus's arm, wearing his claiming bite like a brand, The future queen instead of the rejected nobody. The crowd that had watched her degradation now bowed and curtsied as she passed, their faces masks of careful neutrality. Underneath, though, Sienna could feel their hostility like a physical thing, their resentment, their judgment. "Ignore them," Magnus said softly, guiding her through the crowd. "Half of these wolves are here because they're obligated to be, and the other half are looking for gossip to spread. Give them nothing." Easier said than done when every whispered conversation seemed to be about her, when eyes tracked her every movement, when she caught fragments of commentary that ranged from cruel to cutting. Orphan playing queen. Wonder how long before he comes to his senses. Bet she doesn't last the season. Sienna kept her expression serene, her spine straight, channeling everything Helena and Lady Pemberton had drilled into her. Smile. Nod. Don't react. Be the picture of grace even when you want to scream. They made it halfway through the receiving line before disaster struck. A she-wolf Sienna vaguely recognized from the council meeting, younger than most, dressed in blood-red silk that matched her lipstick, stepped directly into their path. Her smile was poisonous sweetness as she curtsied low. "Your Majesty, and Miss Mercer, how lovely to see you again." "Lady Thornwood," Magnus said coolly, "I don't recall you being on the guest list." "Oh, I'm here as Duchess Blackwood's guest. We're family, you know." Her eyes glittered with malice as they fixed on Sienna. "I wanted to personally congratulate you on your sudden elevation, Miss Mercer. It must be quite overwhelming, going from orphanage charity case to queen-in-waiting in just a few days." "It's an adjustment," Sienna said carefully. "I'm sure. Though I wonder—" Lady Thornwood tilted her head, false concern dripping from every word. "Have you given any thought to what happens when His Majesty realizes his mistake? When the bond proves to be nothing more than a temporary infatuation? Where will you go when you're cast aside?" "Lady Thornwood," Magnus's voice dropped to a dangerous rumble, "you're dangerously close to insulting my mate." "Oh, I would never." The she-wolf's smile widened. "I'm simply concerned for Miss Mercer's well-being. After all, bonds can be broken if both parties consent. And when His Majesty comes to his senses, the only thing that will be broken is your position at court if you continue this line of conversation." Magnus's hand tightened on Sienna's. "My bond with Sienna is permanent, sanctioned by fate and sealed in blood. Anyone suggesting otherwise is calling me a liar. Is that what you're doing, Lady Thornwood?" The she-wolf's composure cracked slightly. "Of course not, Your Majesty. I merely nothing. This conversation is over." Magnus steered Sienna past the sputtering noblewoman, but the damage was done. Every wolf within earshot had heard the exchange, and Sienna could feel the speculation spreading like wildfire. They found a relatively quiet corner near the refreshment tables, and Magnus grabbed 2 glasses of champagne, pressing one into Sienna's trembling hands. "Don't let her get to you," he said quietly. "She's right, though, isn't she?" Sienna took a sip, the bubbles sharp on her tongue. "Everyone here thinks you'll come to your senses eventually, that I'm a phase you're going through. Everyone here is an idiot." Magnus's eyes scanned the crowd, tracking threats with predatory focus. "The bond doesn't lie, Sienna. What we have is real. But what if it's not enough? What if I can't learn fast enough, be strong enough, become what this kingdom needs? Then we'll deal with it together." He started to say more, but his attention snagged on something across the ballroom, his expression hardening. Speaking of problems, Sienna followed his gaze and felt her heart sink. Prince Liam stood near the orchestra, dressed in midnight blue, surrounded by a cluster of young nobles who hung on his every word. He looked every inch the crown prince, charismatic, powerful, beloved. And when his eyes met hers across the crowded room, his smile was razor-sharp. He said something to his companions, then broke away from the group, heading directly toward them. "This should be interesting," Magnus muttered. Liam stopped a respectful distance away and executed a perfect bow. "Father, stepmother." The last word dripped with venom disguised as courtesy. "How lovely to see you both looking so content." "Liam," Magnus's tone carried a warning. "I trust you're not here to cause a scene." "Me? Never!" Liam's amber eyes fixed on Sienna, and she saw the anger burning beneath his polished exterior. I actually came to apologize to Miss Mercer. My behavior at the Ascension Ball was inexcusable. The sudden shift caught Sienna off guard. What? I was cruel, thoughtless. I let my pride override my better judgment, and I hurt someone who didn't deserve it. Liam's voice carried just far enough that nearby wolves could overhear, a public apology designed for maximum impact. I hope you can forgive me. It was a trap. Sienna didn't know how or why, but every instinct screamed danger. That's very gracious of you, Prince Liam, she said carefully. Please, just Liam. We're family now, after all. His smile could have cut glass. In fact, I was hoping I might steal a dance with my new stepmother. If you'll permit it, Father? Magnus's jaw tightened. I don't think— It's fine, Sienna interrupted, ignoring Magnus's sharp look. Refusing would look petty, would give credence to rumors that she was afraid of Liam. One dance? She set down her champagne glass and let Liam lead her onto the dance floor, hyper-aware of every eye in the ballroom tracking their movement. The orchestra struck up a waltz, and Liam pulled her into the formal hold, his hand burning through the fabric at her waist. You're playing a dangerous game, he murmured as they began to move. I'm not playing anything. Your father and I are mates. My father is having a midlife crisis, and you're the symptom. Liam's grip tightened fractionally. Do you really think this will last? That you can hold the attention of a king who's ruled for 50 years? The bond is a biological quirk. It doesn't mean you're suited for him, and it certainly doesn't mean you're suited to be queen. His amber eyes bored into hers. You're in over your head, Sienna. Every wolf in this room can see it. How long before my father sees it too? Is that what you want? For him to reject me the way you did? Something flickered across Liam's expression. Pain, regret, anger, all tangled together. I want you to leave before you destroy everything. My father, the kingdom, yourself. This won't end well for anyone. Is that a threat? It's a prediction. Liam spun her under his arm, and when she came back, his voice dropped even lower. There are wolves in this court who would kill to maintain the status quo, who see you as a threat to carefully maintained power structures. My father can't protect you from all of them. Why are you telling me this? Because despite everything, I don't want to see you hurt. The admission seemed to pain him. You didn't ask for this. You were just in the wrong place at the wrong time, and now you're caught in something that will chew you up and spit you out. The waltz ended, and Liam stepped back, bowing formally. Thank you for the dance, stepmother. Do think about what I said. He walked away, leaving Sienna standing alone on the dance floor, her mind racing. Was he genuinely concerned, or was this more manipulation? Another way to make her doubt herself, question her place. Magnus appeared at her side, his hand settling protectively on her lower back. What did he say? That I'm going to get myself killed. Sienna turned to him, searching his face. Is he right? Are there really wolves here who would— She never finished the question. The lights went out. Not gradually, all at once, plunging the ballroom into absolute darkness. Screams erupted from the crowd, panic spreading like wildfire, and Sienna felt Magnus's arms come around her, pulling her close. Stay with me, he ordered, his voice barely audible over the chaos. Then the first gunshot rang out. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space, followed by more screams, the crash of breaking glass, and the acrid smell of gunpowder. Sienna's wolf surged forward, senses sharpening in the darkness, and she caught the scent of blood. Someone was hurt. Multiple someones. Magnus, down! He tackled her to the floor just as another shot cracked through the air, close enough that Sienna felt the displacement of air where the bullet passed. They landed hard behind an overturned table, and Magnus's body covered hers completely, a shield of muscle and bone and absolute determination. More shots. More screaming. And underneath it all, a voice Sienna didn't recognize shouting orders. Find the orphan! She dies tonight! Ice flooded Sienna's veins. This wasn't random chaos. This was an assassination attempt. On her. We need to move, Magnus growled, already shifting, pulling her with him. Stay low, stay behind me. But before they could move, emergency lights flickered on, dim, red-tinged, barely enough to see by. The ballroom was chaos incarnate. Overturned tables, shattered champagne flutes, nobles crouched behind furniture or pressed against walls. And near the orchestra platform, 3 bodies lay motionless in spreading pools of blood. Sienna's stomach lurched. Then she saw them. 4 wolves in dark clothes, faces covered, moving through the crowd with military precision. They carried guns, illegal in werewolf society, forbidden by ancient law, and their attention was fixed on one target. Her. "Alpha King," one of them shouted. "Step aside, this doesn't concern you. Give us the orphan, and no one else needs to die." Magnus's response was to shift. His transformation was instantaneous and terrifying, clothes shredding as his massive black wolf form emerged, easily twice the size of any normal wolf. Power rolled off him in waves that made every wolf in the ballroom drop their gaze in automatic submission, except the assassins who raised their weapons. "Bad choice," one of them muttered. They opened fire. Magnus moved like liquid shadow, impossibly fast for something his size. Bullets sparked off marble where he'd been standing heartbeats before, and then he was among them, jaws closing around the arm of the nearest assassin with a sickening crunch. The man screamed, his gun clattering away, and Magnus tossed him aside like a broken toy before turning on the next. But there were too many, and they were coordinated, spreading out to flank him while keeping Sienna in their sights. She needed to move, needed to help, needed to do something other than cower behind a table while Magnus fought her battles. Sienna pushed to her feet, and immediately one of the assassins swung his weapon toward her. "There!" The gunshot was impossibly loud, but the bullet never reached her. Liam appeared out of nowhere, slamming into Sienna and taking her to the ground, his body covering hers. She felt the impact as the bullet hit him instead, felt his sharp intake of breath, smelled the copper tang of his blood. "Liam!" "Shut up and stay down," he gritted out, his weight pressing her into the floor. Magnus's roar shook the walls. He abandoned his attack on the other assassins and launched himself at the one who'd shot his son, jaws aiming for the throat. The man tried to dodge, tried to bring his gun around, but Magnus was fury incarnate, unstoppable, and his teeth found their mark. Blood sprayed. The other 3 assassins seemed to realize they'd lost. One went down under Magnus's claws. Another fled for the exits only to be brought down by palace guards, who'd finally arrived, and the third pulled a grenade from his vest. "For the true king!" he screamed, and Sienna saw the madness in his eyes, the fanatical devotion that said he'd die for his cause without hesitation. Time seemed to slow. She saw Magnus turn, saw him realize what was happening, saw him make a choice. He shifted back to human form, vulnerable, exposed, and threw himself toward the assassin, tackling him even as the man's finger left the pin. "Magnus, no!" The explosion wasn't as large as Sienna feared, contained somehow by Magnus's body and the assassins, but the concussive force still sent everyone within 20 feet flying. Sienna's ears rang, her vision blurred, and when she finally managed to focus, she saw Magnus lying motionless near the epicenter, blood pooling beneath him. "No, no, no!" She scrambled toward him, ignoring Liam's grunt of pain as she shoved him aside, ignoring the guards trying to secure the area, ignoring everything except getting to her mate. Magnus's chest was a ruin. Burns, shrapnel, damage that would have killed any normal wolf instantly. His eyes were closed, his breathing shallow and irregular, and through the bond, Sienna felt his pain, his fading strength. "Stay with me," she begged, pressing her hands to the worst of the wounds, even though blood welled between her fingers. "Please, Magnus, don't leave me. I can't do this without you." His eyes fluttered open, ice blue and unfocused. "Sienna, I'm here. I'm right here." Tears streamed down her face. "Help is coming. You're going to be fine." "Liar!" His hand found hers, blood slick and trembling. "Listen, to me. Don't talk. Save your strength." "Oh, no time." His grip tightened fractionally. "The council can't trust them. This came from inside." Horror crashed over her. Someone on the council ordered this? Find who? Trust Liam. Liam tried to stop this, Sienna said, glancing back to where the prince lay, still bleeding from the gunshot wound. He saved me. Good boy. Magnus's breathing grew more labored. Love you, my queen. No. Sienna's wolf howled inside her, the sound of a mate losing her other half. No, you don't get to say goodbye. You don't get to leave me. Healers arrived, pushing her aside, surrounding Magnus with frantic energy. Sienna let them work, stumbling back until strong hands caught her, Helena appearing like a ghost, pulling her away from the carnage. Let them work, child. You can't help him now. He's dying. The words came out broken. He's the Alpha King. He's survived worse. But Helena's expression was grim as she guided Sienna toward where Liam still lay, now being attended by another healer. Prince Liam took a bullet for you. I know. Sienna knelt beside him, meeting his pain-glazed eyes. Why? Because you're family now. Liam's smile was weak, and because my father would never forgive me if I let you die. The healer working on him, a young man with steady hands, spoke without looking up. The bullet went through clean. He'll be fine with rest and proper care. At least that was one piece of good news in a night of horror. Sienna looked around the ballroom, really seeing the devastation for the first time. 7 bodies, dozens of injured, blood and bullet casings, and the acrid smell of gunpowder mixing with the copper scent of spilled blood. And through it all, the whispers were already starting. They were after the orphan. This is her fault. The kingdom was peaceful before she came. Duchess Blackwood emerged from where she'd been sheltering behind a pillar, her dress torn and her face pale, but her voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. This is what happens when unsuitable wolves are elevated beyond their station. The kingdom rejects her, and good wolves die for it. That's enough, Duchess. Helena's voice cracked like a whip. Is it? How many more need to die before we admit the truth? She doesn't belong here. Blackwood pointed an accusing finger at Sienna. Those assassins came for her. They said it themselves, and the Alpha King nearly died protecting her unworthy hide. Other voices rose in agreement, wolves who'd been content to whisper, now emboldened by tragedy to speak their hatred openly. She's cursed. Bad luck. The moon goddess herself rejects this bond. Sienna felt their words like physical blows, each one finding the soft places where doubt already lived. Maybe they were right. Maybe she was the problem. Maybe Magnus would have been safer if he'd never claimed her. But then she felt it through the bond. Magnus's wolf, still fighting, still clinging to life with stubborn determination. And underneath his pain, she felt his absolute certainty that claiming her had been right, that she was worth fighting for, worth dying for. Something crystallized in Sienna's chest, something hard and bright and unbreakable. She stood, and even covered in Magnus's blood, even trembling with shock and fear, she managed to project an authority she didn't feel. Magnus told me the attack came from inside. Her voice rang out clearly. Someone on the council ordered this. Someone in this room wanted me dead badly enough to hire assassins, to break sacred law, to risk the Alpha King's life. Dead silence. That's a serious accusation, Lord Commander Stone said carefully. It's the truth. Magnus's last words to me were a warning. Sienna's gaze swept the assembled nobles, seeing shock, guilt, and calculation in various measures. So here's what's going to happen. Those of you who are innocent have nothing to fear. Those of you who are guilty. Her smile was all teeth. You should start running. You can't threaten the council, Duchess Blackwood sputtered. I'm not threatening anyone. I'm making a promise. Sienna felt her wolf rise to the surface, felt power flow through the bond from Magnus, even in his weakened state. Someone tried to kill me tonight. They failed. And when the Alpha King recovers, because he will recover, we're going to find out who gave the orders. And then we're going to make an example that this kingdom will never forget. She turned to the guards who'd secured the area. Take statements from everyone. No one leaves until we know exactly what happened and who knew about it beforehand. You don't have the authority, Blackwood started. She has mine. The voice was weak but unmistakable. Magnus had regained consciousness on the healer's table, his chest wrapped in blood-soaked bandages, his face gray with pain. But his eyes were alert and fixed on Sienna with fierce pride. My mate speaks with my voice. Her orders are my orders. Anyone who disobeys answers to me. The authority in his tone left no room for argument. The guard snapped to attention and began organizing the crowd, separating witnesses, securing the scene. Magnus beckoned Sienna closer, and she went, taking his blood-slick hand. Fierce little wolf. he murmured. Knew you. Had it. In you. Don't talk. You need to save your strength. Needed to see you. Stand tall. His eyes drifted closed. My queen? Then he lost consciousness again, and the healers rushed to stabilize him. Sienna stood alone in the center of the devastated ballroom, surrounded by nobles who feared her, council members who hated her, and somewhere among them, a traitor who'd tried to have her killed. She was covered in her mate's blood. She was terrified. And for the first time since arriving at the palace, she was absolutely certain of one thing. She wasn't going anywhere. They tried to break her, tried to kill her, tried to prove she didn't belong, and she was going to make every single one of them regret it. The palace became a war zone overnight, invisible battle lines drawn between those who supported Sienna and those who wanted her gone. The difference was that now, after the assassination attempt, the masks had come off. Magnus spent 3 days in the healing wing, his injuries severe enough that even werewolf regeneration struggled to keep pace. Sienna barely left his side, sleeping in a chair beside his bed, eating whatever Helena forced on her, and using every waking moment to plan her next move. Because Magnus had been right, the attack came from inside, and Sienna was going to burn out the rot, no matter who it destroyed. On the 4th morning, while Magnus still slept under the healer's sedation, Helena arrived with news that changed everything. One of the assassins survived, the older woman said quietly, closing the door to ensure privacy. The guards have been questioning him. Sienna's head snapped up. And? He's refusing to talk. Professional killer, trained to resist interrogation. Helena's expression was grim. But Lord Commander Stone believes he can be broken with enough time. We don't have time. Sienna stood, her muscles aching from days of sitting. Where are they holding him? The dungeon's beneath the east wing, but you can't possibly… I'm going to talk to him. Helena's eyes widened. That's highly inappropriate. A future queen doesn't interrogate prisoners personally. A future queen does whatever is necessary to protect her mate and her kingdom. Sienna was already moving toward the door. Are you going to help me, or do I need to find the dungeons myself? For a long moment, Helena stared at her, and Sienna saw the calculation happening behind those sharp eyes. Then the older woman sighed. You're going to get yourself killed, you know that? Probably, but I'd rather die fighting than sit here waiting for the next attempt. Sienna met her gaze squarely. Please, Helena, I need to know who ordered this. Something shifted in Helena's expression, a softening that might have been respect or might have been pity. The East Wing dungeons are heavily guarded. You'll need authorization. I have the Alpha King's authority. He said my orders are his orders. He said that while bleeding out from an explosion. But Helena was already pulling a ring of keys from somewhere in her dress. However, as head of household, I have access to all areas of the estate, including the dungeons. They moved through the palace like ghosts, avoiding the main corridors where nobles still congregated, gossiping about the attack and speculating about the kingdom's future. Sienna caught fragments of conversation as they passed. If Magnus dies, Liam becomes king. The orphan won't last a week without his protection. Heard the council is already drafting succession documents. Each word stoked the fire building in Sienna's chest. Let them plot. Let them scheme. She'd show them exactly what this orphan was capable of. The dungeons were exactly as miserable as expected. Damp stone, the smell of mold and old blood. Torches casting flickering shadows that made everything seem alive and threatening. Guards stationed at regular intervals straightened when they recognized Helena, and the older woman's imperious bearing got them past checkpoints without question. Finally, they reached a cell at the deepest level, isolated from the others. 2 guards stood outside, and through the barred window, Sienna could see a man chained to the wall, his face a mass of bruises from the initial capture. "Open it," she ordered. The guards exchanged uncertain glances. "Miss Mercer, Lord Commander Stone gave strict orders, and I'm giving you new orders on behalf of the Alpha King." Sienna let steel enter her voice. "Open the cell, or explain to His Majesty why you refused his mate access to the prisoner who tried to kill her." The guards' resistance crumbled. One of them unlocked the heavy door, and Sienna stepped inside, her heart pounding, but her expression calm. The assassin looked up, his eyes cold and assessing. "Come to gloat, princess?" "I'm not a princess. I'm the woman you failed to kill. Sienna moved closer, staying just out of his reach. And I'm here to make you an offer. Not interested. You haven't heard it yet. She studied him, middle-aged, scarred, the kind of hardened professional who'd seen too much death to fear it anymore. You're going to die. We both know that. The only question is how painfully and how soon. Torture doesn't work on me, little girl. I'm not talking about torture. Sienna crouched down to his level, meeting his gaze directly. I'm talking about what happens after you're dead. See, in our society, a wolf who commits treason doesn't just lose their life. They lose their name, their legacy, their place in pack memory. Everything they were gets erased. Something flickered in his eyes. Good. She'd found the pressure point. But, Sienna continued, a wolf who provides valuable information in service to the throne, even if that wolf committed crimes, can sometimes earn back their honor. Their name gets remembered. Their family doesn't suffer the shame of having a traitor's blood. You can't offer me that. The Alpha King can, and when he wakes, and he will wake, I'll ask him to honor any deal I make with you right now. She leaned closer. Tell me who hired you, and I'll ensure your death is quick and your name stays clean. Your family won't be punished. Your pack won't be dissolved. You'll be remembered as a warrior who made a mistake but found redemption. The assassin laughed, harsh and bitter. You think I betrayed my employer for something as simple as money? I'm a believer, girl, a true believer in the cause. What cause? The restoration of proper order. His eyes burned with fanatical light. The removal of weak blood from the highest seat of power. Your very existence is an insult to everything our kingdom stands for. So you decided to kill me. I decided to serve the wolves who understand what needs to be done to keep this kingdom strong. He leaned forward as far as his chains allowed. And when you're dead, and you will be dead eventually, they'll find another way, and another, until the bloodline is pure again. Sienna's wolf snarled, but she kept her voice steady. Who's they? Who believes in this cause strongly enough to commit treason? You'll never get that from me. Won't I? Sienna stood, brushing off her knees. You just told me it's multiple people, that there's an organized group, that they're fanatics who believe in bloodline purity. She smiled, cold and sharp. That narrows it down considerably. The assassin's expression shifted, realizing his mistake. Thank you for your cooperation, Sienna said sweetly. Enjoy your last few days. She walked out of the cell, ignoring his shouts, and found Helena waiting with an unreadable expression. Did you get what you needed? The older woman asked. More than I expected. Sienna's mind was already racing, connecting pieces. Bloodline purity. Multiple conspirators. True believers. That could describe half the noble families in the kingdom. But only a few would have the resources and connections to hire professional assassins. Sienna started walking back toward the main palace. Helena, I need you to do something for me. I'm almost afraid to ask. I need detailed records of every council member's financial transactions for the past 6 months. Bank transfers, property purchases, anything that might show large sums of money changing hands. Helena stopped walking. That would require accessing private financial records. It's illegal without a royal warrant. Then I'll get a warrant from Magnus. He's unconscious. Then I'll forge one. Sienna spun to face her. Someone on that council tried to kill me and nearly killed their king. I don't care about legality right now. I care about finding them before they try again. You're asking me to commit treason. I'm asking you to help me save the kingdom from the wolves who are actually committing treason. Sienna softened her tone. Please, Helena. I know you don't trust me. I know you think I'm unsuitable, but you've served this kingdom your entire life. You know something is rotten at its core. Help me cut it out. Helena was quiet for a long moment, her sharp eyes searching Sienna's face. Then she sighed. There's a record keeper in the lower archives, Gerald Moss. He's loyal to the throne above all else, and he has access to financial records that would take weeks to obtain through official channels. She pulled out a piece of parchment and scribbled an address. Give him this. Tell him I sent you. He'll help. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. If this goes wrong, we'll both hang for it. Helena's expression was grim. And Sienna, be careful. Whoever is behind this has resources and influence. If they realize you're getting close, they'll try to kill me again, I know. Sienna pocketed the address. Let them try. She returned to Magnus's room long enough to check on him. Still unconscious but stable, the healers assured her, then slipped out through a servant's entrance that Helena had shown her. The palace grounds were massive, and getting to the archives required crossing 2 courtyards and navigating through a maze of administrative buildings. Sienna kept her head down, moving quickly, hyper-aware of every wolf she passed. Any one of them could be working for the conspiracy. Any one of them could recognize her and alert their masters. The archives were housed in a squat stone building that looked like it had been old when the kingdom was young. Inside, the air smelled of parchment and dust and ancient magic designed to preserve records across centuries. A small, wizened wolf looked up from a desk piled with leather-bound ledgers. "Gerald Moss?" Sienna asked. "Who's asking?" She handed him Helena's note. He read it, his bushy eyebrows climbing toward his hairline, then looked at Sienna with new eyes. "You're the orphan queen. I'm the Alpha King's mate." Same thing, according to most of the nobles. But his tone wasn't hostile, just matter of fact. "Helena says you need financial records. What are you looking for?" "Large transfers of money, payments to mercenaries or assassins. Anything that might connect a council member to the attack at the gala." Sienna leaned against his desk. "Can you help?" Gerald pursed his lips. "That's treasonous territory, miss." "So is trying to murder the future queen." "Fair point." He stood, moving toward shelves that stretched into shadow. "How far back?" 6 months. Start with the council members who were most vocal against my appointment. That's most of them. But Gerald was already pulling ledgers, his gnarled hands moving with practiced efficiency. "This will take time. And if anyone finds out I helped you, they won't, I'll make sure of it." Over the next 4 hours, they worked through mountains of records. Gerald pulled files, Sienna cross-referenced transactions, and slowly a pattern began to emerge. 3 council members, Duchess Blackwood, Lady Cordelia Ashford, and a lesser-known lord named Bartholomew Crane, had all made substantial withdrawals in the weeks leading up to the gala. None of the amounts were large enough to raise immediate suspicion individually, but together they totaled almost exactly what a professional assassination squad would cost. "It could be coincidence," Gerald said, though his tone suggested he didn't believe it. "It's not." Sienna stared at the evidence spread across the desk. "This is it. This is the conspiracy. You need to take this to the Alpha King. He's still unconscious, and by the time he wakes, they might realize we're onto them and destroy evidence." Sienna's mind raced through possibilities. "I need to move now. You can't just accuse 3 council members of treason without proof. These records show suspicious timing, but not direct payment to the assassins. Then I need to make them confess." Gerald's eyes widened. "How exactly do you plan to do that?" Sienna thought about Vargas's combat training, about the way the instructor had taught her to find pressure points and exploit weaknesses, about Helena's lessons in court politics and the careful dance of power, and she smiled. By giving them exactly what they want. The next morning, Sienna called an emergency council meeting. Helena tried to talk her out of it, citing Magnus's continued unconsciousness and the impropriety of a not-yet-crowned queen convening the council, but Sienna was adamant. "Send the summons. Tell them it's regarding the succession." That got their attention. All 12 council members arrived within the hour, gathering in the council chamber with expressions ranging from curious to hostile. Duchess Blackwood looked particularly smug, as did Lady Ashford and Lord Crane. Sienna entered last, deliberately making them wait, wearing a simple black dress that Helena had insisted was appropriately somber. She took her seat at the head of the table, Magnus's seat, and let the silence stretch. "You called this meeting," Lord Commander Stone finally said. "We're here. What's so urgent?" "The Alpha King's condition," Sienna said quietly. "The healers inform me his injuries are more severe than initially believed." That wasn't true. Magnus was healing well, expected to wake within days, but they didn't need to know that. "How severe?" Cordelia leaned forward. "Severe enough that succession plans need to be discussed." Sienna let pain color her voice, channeling the very real fear she'd felt watching Magnus nearly die. If he doesn't recover, Prince Liam would ascend, Duchess Blackwood said quickly. Too quickly. As the legitimate heir. Unless the Alpha King dies while still mated to me, Sienna corrected. In which case, Pack law states that his mate can claim the throne in his stead to rule until a suitable heir is chosen. Shocked silence. That's unprecedented, Lord Crane sputtered. It's law. Sienna kept her expression neutral. I've been researching Pack history with Master Soren. There are 3 historical precedents for a queen ruling in her own right after her mate's death. Those were queens with decades of experience, powerful wolves from established bloodlines. Duchess Blackwood's face had gone pale. You can't seriously be suggesting— I'm not suggesting anything. I'm stating facts. Sienna met each council member's gaze in turn. If Magnus dies, I inherit his authority, and the first thing I would do as queen is investigate who ordered the attack that killed him. She saw it then, the flash of fear in Blackwood's eyes, the way Cordelia's hand tightened on her armrest, how Lord Crane suddenly wouldn't meet her gaze. Gotcha. That investigation is already underway, Stone said carefully. Proper authorities are handling it. Proper authorities who answer to this council? Sienna's smile was sharp. Forgive me if I'd prefer to handle it personally. After all, someone in this room hired those assassins. Someone sitting at this table right now wanted me dead badly enough to risk everything. The room erupted. Denials, accusations, shock both genuine and performed. Sienna let it wash over her, watching the 3 conspirators carefully. Blackwood's outrage was too loud, Cordelia's confusion too perfectly executed, and Crane had gone completely still, the reaction of a predator deciding whether to flee or fight. That's a serious accusation, Stone said, his voice cutting through the chaos. Do you have proof? I have financial records showing 3 council members making suspicious transactions in the weeks before the attack. Sienna stood, pulling copies of the ledgers from a folder Helena had prepared. I have testimony from the surviving assassin about a conspiracy of true believers in bloodline purity. And I have the logic that only someone with significant resources and inside knowledge could have coordinated an attack during the one event where security was necessarily relaxed to accommodate hundreds of guests. She placed the records on the table, spreading them out like a hand of cards. Duchess Blackwood, Lady Ashford, Lord Crane, would any of you care to explain these withdrawals? Blackwood shot to her feet. This is outrageous. Those are private financial records, which I obtained with royal authority. You don't have royal authority. You're a jumped-up orphan playing at being queen. I'm the Alpha King's mate, which gives me every right to investigate attempts on my life. Sienna's voice dropped, cold and precise. And right now, all evidence points to you 3. So either explain the money, or I'll have you arrested for treason. You wouldn't dare, Cordelia hissed. Try me. The standoff stretched, tension crackling through the air like lightning before a storm. Then Lord Crane made his mistake. He bolted. The older wolf was halfway to the door before Sienna moved, her training with Vargas finally paying off. She caught him by the arm, used his momentum against him, and had him face down on the council table before he could draw breath to scream. Going somewhere? She asked sweetly. Get off me, you little— Sienna twisted his arm and he yelped in pain. I'd choose your next words carefully, Lord Crane. You're already looking at execution for treason. Don't add assaulting the future queen to your charges. I didn't, we only— He gasped as she applied more pressure. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Like what? Sienna demanded. You were supposed to die. The Alpha King was supposed to see sense and reject you before it went this far. Crane's composure cracked completely. But he claimed you anyway, made you queen, and we had no choice. Who's we? When he didn't answer immediately, Sienna applied more pressure. Tell me, or I break your arm. Blackwood, Ashford, a dozen others in the noble houses. The words tumbled out in a rush. We all agreed. The bloodline had to be protected. You're a contamination, an orphan with weak blood and no lineage. Your children would weaken the royal line for generations. So you hired assassins to kill me. To save the kingdom. Crane twisted to look at her, his eyes wild with fanatical certainty. Don't you understand? You're destroying everything our ancestors built. Every day you remain alive, you corrupt the pure bloodline, you weaken pack law, Enough! Sienna released him, stepping back. Lord Commander Stone, arrest these three for conspiracy to commit murder and treason against the crown. Guards moved forward immediately, surrounding Blackwood, Ashford, and Crane. The Duchess tried to protest. Cordelia demanded a formal hearing, but Crane had already confessed in front of witnesses. The evidence was damning. This isn't over, Blackwood snarled as guards clapped chains on her wrists. There are others, wolves more powerful than us who believe the same thing. They'll finish what we started. Let them try. Sienna's voice carried absolute certainty. I survived your attempt. I'll survive theirs too. And every time you people come at me, I'll be stronger, smarter, and more ready. She watched them dragged away, feeling the weight of every eye in the council chamber on her. The other 9 members, the ones not involved in the conspiracy, looked at her with expressions ranging from shock to grudging respect. Well, Stone said into the silence, that was decisive. It was necessary. Sienna returned to Magnus's seat, suddenly exhausted. The rot has been cut out. What remains is whether the rest of you can accept me as your queen, or if we need to have this conversation again in a few months. You've certainly proven you're no pushover, one of the other counselors, a quiet woman Sienna vaguely recognized as Lady Merchant, said thoughtfully. Most nobles would have hidden behind the Alpha King's protection and let others handle the investigation. Most nobles weren't raised in an orphanage where you learn to fight your own battles or starve. Sienna met her gaze. I'm not most nobles, and I'm never going to be what you think a queen should be, but I'm what fate chose, and I'm what Magnus claimed, and I'm what you're stuck with. Fair enough, Lady Merchant actually smiled. For what it's worth, you have my support. Anyone who can catch a conspirator mid-flight and force a confession deserves to rule. One by one, the other counselors echoed the sentiment. Not all of them, a few remained silent, their expressions neutral, but enough that Sienna felt the tide turning. She'd proven herself, not through breeding or bloodline or perfect political maneuvering, but through sheer stubborn refusal to break. The meeting adjourned with actual respect in the air, and Sienna made it back to Magnus's healing room before her legs finally gave out. Helena found her there, sitting on the floor beside Magnus's bed, shaking with reaction. I heard what happened, the older woman said, settling beside her with surprising grace. The whole palace is talking about how you caught Lord Crane and extracted a confession. I got lucky. He panicked. You created the circumstances that made him panic. That's strategy, not luck. Helena studied her. You know, when Magnus first claimed you, I thought you'd be dead within a week, either from assassination or from your own inexperience. That's encouraging. But you've surprised me. You're clever, adaptable, and you have a spine of steel underneath all that uncertainty. Helena's smile was slight but genuine. You might actually survive being queen. High praise. It's the truth. Helena stood, offering her hand to help Sienna up. Now come. You need food, a bath, and sleep. The kingdom won't fall apart if you take care of yourself for a few hours. Sienna let herself be pulled to her feet, but before Helena could lead her away, a voice, rough with disuse but unmistakably familiar, spoke from the bed. Did I hear that right? You caught the conspirators? Sienna spun. Magnus's ice-blue eyes were open, unfocused but aware, and his hand reached toward her. Magnus! She was at his side in an instant, taking his hand, feeling the bond surge with his waking consciousness. You're awake. Hard to sleep with my mate, starting wars in the council chamber. His smile was weak but real. Helena's right. Wait, you're full of surprises. I had to do something. They tried to kill you. So you trapped them and made them confess. Magnus's grip tightened fractionally on her hand. My fierce little wolf, becoming a proper queen. Tears burned Sienna's eyes. Don't talk. You need to rest. Later. First, need to tell you, he struggled to focus, proud of you. So, damn proud. And then his eyes closed again, exhaustion pulling him back under, but the smile on his face remained. Sienna stood there, holding her mate's hand, feeling the bond warm and strong between them despite his injuries. She'd done it. She'd found the conspirators, forced a confession, and proven to the council that she was more than just a weak orphan in over her head. She was the Alpha King's mate. She was their future queen, and anyone who forgot that would learn the lesson the hard way. Helena cleared her throat softly. Still think you need that bath and sleep. In a minute. Sienna couldn't tear her eyes away from Magnus's sleeping face. I just want to stay here a little longer. Suit yourself. But Helena's voice was fond as she left, closing the door quietly behind her. Sienna settled back into the chair beside Magnus's bed, her hand still holding his, and let herself believe for the first time since this all began that maybe she actually could do this. Maybe she could be queen. Maybe she could survive. Maybe she was exactly where she belonged. Magnus woke fully 3 days later. His wounds healed enough that the healers cleared him to leave the medical wing. Sienna was there when his eyes opened, had been there every moment she could spare between council meetings and the continued investigation into the conspiracy's full scope. How long was I out? He asked, his voice stronger now, though still rough around the edges. Almost a week total. Sienna helped him sit up, adjusting pillows behind his back. Long enough for me to dismantle a treason plot and terrify the council into submission. His laugh was warm, genuine. I want to hear everything, but first, he pulled her down for a kiss that started gentle and quickly turned hungry, the bond flaring between them with his renewed strength. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Magnus's ice-blue eyes were bright with heat. I missed you. You were unconscious. Still missed you. His hand cupped her face, thumb tracing her cheekbone. Helena kept me updated during my brief moments of lucidity. You've been busy. Someone had to keep the kingdom from falling apart. Sienna settled on the edge of the bed, her hand finding his. The conspiracy went deeper than just Blackwood, Ashford, and Crane. We've identified 7 more noble families involved, though most of them were providing funding rather than direct planning. How did you get them to confess? I didn't. I gave them a choice. Cooperate with the investigation and face exile, or resist and face execution. Her smile was sharp. Most chose exile. The ones who didn't are in the dungeons awaiting trial. Magnus studied her face, something like awe in his expression. You've changed. I had to. This world doesn't reward weakness. Sienna's voice softened. I learned from the best. Vargas taught me to fight, Helena taught me to think strategically, and you taught me that being queen means making hard choices. I didn't teach you that. You already knew it. He squeezed her hand. You've been making hard choices your whole life. I just gave you a bigger stage. A knock interrupted them. Liam entered, his arm still in a sling from the bullet wound, but otherwise recovered. His expression was careful, neutral, as he approached the bed. Father, good to see you awake. Liam. Magnus's tone warmed fractionally. I hear you took a bullet for my mate. Seemed like the thing to do at the time. Liam's gaze flicked to Sienna, something complicated passing through his amber eyes. How are you holding up? Still breathing, still queen. Sienna stood, suddenly uncomfortable with the family dynamic. I'll give you two some privacy. Stay, Magnus said firmly. Liam, I owe you my gratitude. If you hadn't protected Sienna, she would have died, and you would have gone on a rampage that destroyed half the kingdom. Liam's smile was wry. I was protecting everyone, really. Regardless, you put yourself between her and danger, and that means something. Magnus's voice took on formal weight, especially given your history. Silence fell, heavy with unspoken things. Finally, Liam spoke. I was wrong at the ball, about her. The words came out stiff, like he was pulling them from somewhere painful. I let pride and prejudice cloud my judgment, and I rejected a gift that should have been treasured. Liam? Sienna started. Let me finish. He turned to face her fully. You were never the problem, Sienna. I was. I was so focused on bloodlines and traditions and what I thought a queen should be that I couldn't see what was standing right in front of me. Someone brave, resilient, and stronger than half the nobles in this kingdom combined. That's generous of you to say. It's the truth. And I'm sorry. Liam's jaw tightened. I'm sorry I humiliated you. I'm sorry I rejected you. And I'm sorry I ever made you feel like you weren't good enough because you're better than I deserved. The apology hung in the air between them, raw and genuine. Sienna felt the phantom ache of their severed bond, the what might have been that would always exist between them. Thank you, she said quietly. That means more than you know. Does it change anything? Liam's voice was carefully neutral. No. Sienna moved back to Magnus's side, the living bond between them thrumming with certainty. I'm where I belong now. But I accept your apology, and I hope we can find a way to work together. For the kingdom's sake. For the kingdom's sake, Liam echoed. He turned to Magnus. I'll leave you to rest. But Father, when you're ready, the council is requesting a formal meeting to address the succession and the conspiracy's aftermath. Tell them we'll meet in 2 days. That should give me time to recover and Sienna time to prepare her full report. Magnus's smile was predatory. I'm very interested in hearing exactly how she trapped our would-be assassins. After Liam left, Sienna helped Magnus stand, his strength returning with each passing hour. They walked together through the palace corridors, and Sienna noticed how differently the servants and nobles reacted now. Where before they'd looked at her with contempt or pity, now there was respect. Fear, in some cases. She'd proven herself in blood and cunning, and the kingdom was taking notice. The council meeting 2 days later was packed. Every noble family of significance had sent representatives, wanting to witness the Alpha King's first official appearance since the attack, and to see how the conspiracy's revelation would reshape the court's power structure. Magnus entered with Sienna on his arm, both of them dressed in formal black that made a statement without words. They were in mourning for those killed in the attack, and they were united in their pursuit of justice. The 12 council seats had changed. Blackwood, Ashford, and Crane's chairs sat empty, their families stripped of rank and exiled to the far territories. 3 new councillors had been appointed, wolves from lesser houses who'd proven their loyalty during the investigation. Magnus took his seat, pulling Sienna down beside him rather than making her stand. The gesture, putting her on equal footing, literally, rippled through the assembled nobles. Let's begin, Magnus said, his voice carrying absolute authority despite his recent injuries. I understand my mate has been running the kingdom in my absence. Someone want to tell me how badly she's broken everything? Nervous laughter from some quarters. But Lord Commander Stone spoke up, his tone serious. Actually, Your Majesty, she's been remarkably effective. The conspiracy has been rooted out, the guilty parties imprisoned or exiled, and stability has been maintained despite significant upheaval. I'd say she's proven herself more than capable. High praise from you, Commander. Magnus turned to Sienna. Want to walk us through what happened? Sienna stood, and every eye in the room locked onto her. A week ago, this would have terrified her. Now she felt only cold determination. The attack at the gala was coordinated by 3 council members and funded by 7 noble houses. Their goal was simple: kill me, destabilize the Alpha King's authority, and force a return to what they considered proper bloodline succession. Her voice remained steady as she laid out the evidence, the financial records, the confessions. They called themselves the purists. They believed that my existence as queen would weaken the royal line and corrupt pack law. And now, someone called from the back, now they're either in prison awaiting execution or exiled to territories where their influence means nothing. Sienna's smile was sharp. And their assets have been seized to pay restitution to the families of those killed in the attack. Murmurs ran through the crowd. Seizing noble assets was a bold move, one that sent a clear message about the cost of treason. Some of you probably agree with them, Sienna continued, her gaze sweeping the room. You probably think an orphan has no business being queen, that my bloodline is weak, my wolf is small, and I'm fundamentally unsuited for this role. Dead silence. No one was brave enough to confirm it, but she could see the truth in certain faces. You're right. I'm not what you expected. I don't have centuries of lineage or powerful family connections. I can't trace my ancestry back to the kingdom's founding. Sienna's voice hardened. But I'm what fate chose. I'm what the Alpha King claimed. And I'm the wolf who stopped a conspiracy that would have torn this kingdom apart. She let that sink in before continuing. So, here's how this is going to work going forward. Those of you who can accept me as queen truly accept me, not just pay lip service while plotting behind closed doors, will find me a fair ruler and a fierce ally. Those of you who can't, her smile turned cold. Leave now. Take your families and your assets and find somewhere else to live. Because I promise you, I will not tolerate another assassination attempt. The next conspiracy I uncover won't end in exile. It will end in blood. The threat hung in the air, absolute and uncompromising. Several nobles shifted uncomfortably, but no one moved toward the exits. Good. Sienna returned to her seat. Then let's talk about the future. What followed was 3 hours of political maneuvering, but it was different now. Nobles who'd openly disdained Sienna a week ago now addressed her with respect. Questions were asked with deference rather than condescension. And when decisions were made, her opinion carried weight equal to Magnus's. By the time the meeting ended, Sienna felt exhausted but triumphant. She'd done it. She'd actually done it. As nobles filed out, Lady Merchant approached, her expression thoughtful. Your Majesty, if I might have a word? Of course. I wanted to apologize. I was among those who doubted you initially, who thought the Alpha King had made a mistake in claiming you. Lady Merchant's smile was rueful. I was wrong. You've proven yourself not just capable, but exceptional. The kingdom is lucky to have you. Thank you. That means a lot. I also wanted to offer my assistance, if you'll accept it. I have connections throughout the merchant networks, and I suspect you'll need allies as you continue to establish your authority. Lady Merchant's eyes gleamed with calculation. Plus, it's good business to align with the winning side. I appreciate your honesty and your offer. I'll take you up on both. Sienna extended her hand, and they shook on it, a new alliance forged in the aftermath of conspiracy. Other nobles approached with similar offers over the next hour, some genuine, others clearly opportunistic, but all recognizing that Sienna was here to stay. When the chamber finally emptied, leaving just Sienna, Magnus, and Helena, the older woman allowed herself a rare smile. You've come a long way from the terrified girl in the borrowed dress. I had good teachers. Sienna sagged against Magnus, suddenly aware of how tired she was. Is it always going to be this exhausting? Yes, both Magnus and Helena said simultaneously. Fantastic. Magnus pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her temple. But you won't face it alone. You have me, Helena, allies on the council, and a kingdom that's starting to realize you're exactly what it needs. What it needs is a queen who doesn't collapse after one council meeting. What it needs is a queen who survived an assassination attempt, trapped a conspiracy, and forced a room full of prideful nobles to bow. Magnus's voice was warm with pride. Everything else, you'll learn. Over the next month, Sienna threw herself into that learning with single-minded determination. Vargas's combat training intensified until Sienna could hold her own against opponents twice her size. Master Soren's lessons in pack law became discussions rather than lectures, as Sienna's understanding deepened. And Lady Pemberton's etiquette instruction evolved into strategic coaching on how to navigate the treacherous waters of high society. But the real transformation happened during the formal coronation. The ceremony was held under the full moon, ancient and sacred, presided over by the eldest pack shamans. Sienna wore white, traditional for a queen's coronation, the dress custom-made to fit her perfectly, no more borrowed gowns from charity closets. Her dark hair was woven with silver threads that caught the moonlight, and at her throat she wore the claiming bite, like the badge of honor it was. Magnus stood beside her in formal black, every inch the Alpha King, his ice-blue eyes never leaving her face as the shamans performed the ancient rites. Do you, Sienna Mercer, accept the burden of queenship? Do you swear to protect this kingdom, to uphold pack law, and to rule with wisdom and strength until your dying breath? I do. Her voice carried across the assembled crowd. Hundreds of wolves gathered to witness, including many who'd wanted her dead weeks earlier. Do you accept the bond between ruler and ruled, between throne and territory, between power and responsibility? I do. The head shaman stepped forward with a crown wrought from silver and moonstone, ancient and beautiful, worn by queens for generations. She placed it on Sienna's head, and the weight of it was both literal and symbolic. Then by the authority vested in me by pack law and tradition, I declare you Queen Sienna Valerius, true mate of the Alpha King, ruler of the Northern Territories, protector of the realm." The crowd erupted in howls, hundreds of wolves giving voice to their acknowledgement, their acceptance, their submission to her authority. The sound washed over Sienna like a wave, primal and powerful, and her wolf rose to meet it, adding her own voice to the chorus. Small she might be, but her howl carried the weight of survival, of battles fought and won, of an orphan who'd claimed her throne through blood and cunning and sheer stubborn refusal to break. When the howling finally faded, Magnus took her hand and raised it high, presenting her to the kingdom. "Your queen," he declared, his voice ringing with pride and power. "Let any who would challenge her authority step forward now and face us both." Silence. Absolute reverent silence. No one was that stupid. The ceremony concluded with a feast that lasted until dawn, nobles and commoners alike celebrating the kingdom's stability and new queen. Sienna moved through the crowd on Magnus's arm, accepting congratulations and subtle pledges of loyalty, building alliances that would serve her in the years to come. She caught sight of Liam across the ballroom, the same ballroom where he'd rejected her just 6 weeks ago. Their eyes met, and he raised his glass in a silent toast, not to what might have been, but to what was. An acknowledgement that fate had chosen correctly, that they were all exactly where they were meant to be. Sienna returned the gesture, then turned back to Magnus, who was watching her with undisguised affection. "What?" she asked. "Just appreciating how far you've come." He pulled her into a dance, moving easily through the waltz despite the lingering stiffness from his injuries. From terrified orphan to fierce queen in 6 weeks. It's impressive. I had proper motivation. People kept trying to kill me. And you kept surviving. That's the important part. Magnus spun her under his arm, and when she came back, his expression was serious. "I need to tell you something." "That sounds ominous." "Not ominous, just honest." He guided her toward the terrace, away from the crowd, into the moonlight that had witnessed her coronation. "When I first claimed you, it was partly impulse. I felt the bond, recognized you as my mate, and acted on instinct to protect you from Liam's cruelty." Sienna's heart clenched. "Are you saying you regret it?" "I'm saying the opposite." Magnus cupped her face, his thumbs brushing away tears she hadn't realized were falling. "I claimed you on instinct, but I'm keeping you by choice. Every day I choose you. Not because fate demands it, or because the bond compels me, but because you're exactly who I want by my side. Strong, brave, clever, and absolutely terrifying when you need to be. I'm still learning. We all are. That's what makes it interesting." He kissed her, soft and deep, pouring emotion through the bond that made her knees weak. "I love you, Sienna. Not as my mate or my queen, but as you. The woman who survived impossible odds and came out stronger." "I love you too." The words felt inadequate for the depth of feeling flowing between them, but they were all she had. "Even when I'm terrified, even when I have no idea what I'm doing, I love you." They stood together in the moonlight, king and queen, mates bound by fate and choice in equal measure, and for the first time since this all began, Sienna felt truly at peace. The next morning brought new challenges, as it always would. There were territories to manage, politics to navigate, wolves to placate or intimidate depending on the situation. But Sienna faced it all with Magnus at her side and a growing confidence in her own abilities. She visited the orphanage 3 months after her coronation, arriving in simple clothes with minimal fanfare. Matron Carr nearly fainted when she realized who was standing in her office. "Your Majesty, we had no idea you were coming. I wanted it to be a surprise." Sienna looked around the familiar space, seeing it with new eyes. The worn furniture, the too thin blankets, the children in clothes that had been mended too many times. "I want to make some changes. Increased funding, better facilities, proper education for all the children. That's incredibly generous. It's necessary." Sienna's voice was firm. "Every child here deserves the chance to become something more than their circumstances. I'm proof of that. And I won't be queen of a kingdom that throws away its most vulnerable." The reforms she implemented over the following year transformed not just St. Raphael's, but every orphanage and charity house in the kingdom. Education became mandatory, nutrition improved, and programs were established to help displaced wolves find packs and purpose. Some nobles grumbled about the cost. Sienna ignored them. This was her legacy, the change she could make that mattered more than any political maneuvering. She also established a new council position, advocate for the displaced, and appointed a fierce young she-wolf named Maya, who'd grown up in the same orphanage, someone who understood what it meant to have nothing and who would fight like hell to ensure no one fell through the cracks. The kingdom transformed under her influence, not quickly, not easily, but steadily. Policies changed, attitudes shifted, and slowly, the rigid bloodline hierarchies began to crack. One evening, 2 years after her coronation, Sienna stood on the palace balcony watching the sun set over her kingdom. Magnus joined her, sliding an arm around her waist. "You're pregnant." She turned to him, startled. "How did you?" "I can smell it, the change in your scent." His smile was radiant. "When were you planning to tell me?" "When I was sure. The healers confirmed it this morning." Sienna placed a hand on her still flat stomach. "I'm terrified." "You're always terrified, and you're always magnificent anyway." Magnus's hand covered hers. "This child, our child, is going to be extraordinary. The bloodline of the Alpha King, and a queen who conquered her kingdom through sheer force of will." The purists would have hated this. The purists are rotting in exile or feeding worms. Their opinions don't matter. Magnus turned her to face him. "What matters is that we're building something new. A kingdom where strength comes from character, not bloodline. Where orphans can become queens and change the world." "You're being poetic." "I'm being honest." He kissed her, gentle and reverent. "You changed me, Sienna. Made me remember why I became king in the first place, to protect and serve, not to maintain traditions for tradition's sake." 9 months later, Sienna gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl, both healthy, both strong. The boy had Magnus's ice-blue eyes, the girl had Sienna's dark hair, and both had lungs that could wake the dead. Liam was the first to visit after the birth, bringing gifts and a complicated expression. "They're beautiful," he said, looking down at the sleeping infants. "Congratulations." "Thank you." Sienna was exhausted but content, Magnus beside her looking equally sleep-deprived and proud. "Want to hold one?" Liam hesitated, then carefully took the baby girl. She fussed for a moment before settling against him, and something in his expression softened. "What are their names?" "Alara," Sienna said, indicating the girl. "And Kieran," nodding toward the boy in Magnus's arms. "Good names. Strong names." Liam looked between the twins and their parents. "They're going to change everything, you know. The old guard can complain all they want, but once these two are grown, no one will remember when bloodline was more important than capability." "That's the plan," Magnus said quietly. "Good." Liam carefully returned Alara to Sienna's arms. "For what it's worth, I think you were right, both of you, about everything." It was the closest he'd come to admitting that fate had made the correct choice, that Sienna was meant to be queen and Magnus was meant to claim her. It cost him to say it, but he said it anyway. After he left, Sienna looked at Magnus over their sleeping children. "Did we do the right thing, bringing children into this world when it's still so dangerous?" "We did the necessary thing, and we'll teach them to be strong enough to handle whatever comes." Magnus's voice was firm. "They're our legacy, Sienna. Proof that love and choice matter more than bloodline and tradition. The twins grew up fierce and beloved, raised by a queen who'd survived assassination and a king who'd chosen compassion over pride. They learned combat from Vargas, politics from Helena, and the importance of caring for the vulnerable from their mother's example. And when Alara, at age 16, declared her intention to marry a blacksmith's son she'd fallen in love with, Sienna's only response was to ask if he made her happy. "He does," Alara said firmly, so much her mother's daughter in that moment. "Then you have my blessing. Love is rare enough in this world. Hold on to it when you find it." The wedding was simple compared to royal standards, but joyful in ways the formal coronations never were. Sienna watched her daughter marry for love rather than politics, breaking centuries of tradition, and felt pride swell in her chest. This was what she'd fought for, what she'd survived for. A kingdom where wolves were valued for who they were, not where they came from. Years passed, Magnus remained strong and vital, defying the usual aging process through sheer stubborn will and the strength of their bond. Sienna grew into her role completely. No longer the uncertain orphan, but a queen whose authority was absolute and whose compassion was legendary. On their 20th anniversary, Magnus took her back to the terrace where he'd first kissed her, where they'd fled the chaos of the Ascension Ball. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "Accepting me instead of running away from all this?" Sienna thought about the scared girl in the borrowed dress, the one who'd had her heart broken and her world shattered in the span of minutes. Thought about everything that had come after, the assassination attempts, the political battles, the constant pressure to prove herself worthy. "Not for a second," she said honestly. "This life broke me and rebuilt me into something stronger. You gave me a crown, but I claimed a kingdom, and I'd do it all again in a heartbeat. Even the getting shot at part? Especially that. It made me realize I was strong enough to survive anything." She pulled him close, feeling the bond between them as strong as ever. "We did good, Magnus. We built something that will outlast us. We built something extraordinary." He kissed her, deep and thorough, 20 years of love and partnership in that single gesture. "And it all started because my idiot son was too proud to see what was standing right in front of him." Fate works in mysterious ways. That it does. They stood together in the moonlight, the same moon that had witnessed her claiming, her coronation, and countless nights since. King and queen, mates, partners in every sense that mattered. And somewhere in the palace below, their children slept safely, the next generation of a kingdom transformed by an orphan who'd refused to break. Sienna Mercer had walked into the Ascension Ball expecting nothing and had claimed everything. Not because of her bloodline or her wolf strength, but because when the world tried to crush her, she'd found the courage to push back. She was queen, she was loved, she was exactly where she belonged. And that was more than enough.